Like,
Happy.
there's like but usually we've had one small situation.
I smoke all I'm cool with that.
It's not
Yeah.
usually that kind of like thing. No, like all the time. Like,
All right, good evening, everyone. It is Tuesday, August 13th, 2019. The place is City Hall in Athens, Georgia. I hope everybody's having a good week. We're here for our monthly work session, on which we have just 3 agenda items. 2 from Solid Waste Department Director Suki Janssen, and 1 that involves our annual discussion of items that we're going to bring to our local legislative delegation to the General Assembly. So with that, I'll ask Suki Janssen to come up to talk a little bit about landfill history.
Awesome. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. You need to
I'm glad to be
welcome
here.
Melissa back.
And I have got 2 topics, so I will hopefully, I don't want to be between you and dinner. So, but feel free to ask. I have some folks in the audience that are here. My mother and father always taught me, if you can't answer a question, get somebody smarter than you to work for you, work with you, or somebody that challenges your ideas. So got a little bit of all of that behind me. So we should be able to answer just about any question that you have tonight. So thank you. Both of these presentations were presentations that were requested that you guys requested of our department. So what we wanted to do is bring forward information that we had on hand. And the first one is a landfill groundwater history. That's what we want to go over first. We're going to go over the purpose of this, a little bit of the history, groundwater monitoring program, and some of our citizen agreements, or our 2 citizen agreements, current testing and results. Behind me, I have Chris Klamke with Atlantic Coast Consulting. He'll be going over our testing, and then we'll summarize and then take any next steps, staff recommended next steps, and anything that you might have from us as well, for us as well. Purpose of this presentation is just to provide you guys with a history of the landfill, specifically focusing on groundwater, our monitoring wells, testing schedule, results, groundwater movement surrounding private wells, and then the expansion of Athens-Clarke County public utility lines that have already been expanded out there to accommodate citizens surrounding the landfill. We've got lots of history out at the landfill. We tried to focus on only pieces that pertain to groundwater. So there might be things on here that you didn't know that went on. We did not hit all of them. But of course, that landfill has been used since 1976. At that time, it was called the Dunlap Road Sanitary Landfill. It was permitted in 1976. In 1988, the EPD, which is Environmental Protection Division, approved groundwater monitoring program. It was implemented that year as well. November 1992, our final landfill agreement, because our landfill is a partnership between Athens-Clarke County and Oglethorpe County, and the Citizens Committee agreement came into play, or came into being. February 1st, 1995, and we'll go over that 1992 agreement more. I will tell you when we'll go over some of these a little bit more. Otherwise, I'm just going to run through them and try to describe them in the history portion as they pertain to groundwater. December 1997, corrective measures assessment was approved. The corrective measures assessment was approved due to our existing disposal areas, 1 and 2, which are unlined landfills, because they were built prior to RCRA standards, which we'll talk about. So you can see spring of 1999, our existing disposal areas, and I'm going to go ahead and give you a map. I always bring things for you guys. So I'm going to go ahead and hand out 2 things, if you don't mind, or have Mayor Gertz hand out 2 things. One is the anatomy of a landfill. The other is a map that might be a little bit better than the maps that are in your presentation. And you can see we highlighted the existing disposal areas. We call them EDA 1 and 2 on that map, so you can see where they're located, but those are unlined disposal areas of municipal solid waste. In 1999, the spring of 1999, the existing disposal EDAs 1 and 2 were capped, which means they were covered with clay and capped so rainwater could no longer percolate through and cause any leachate issues. We got closure certificates for EPA 1 and 2 in January 2001. And September 22nd, there was a health consultation done, a third-party health consultation that went out and looked at contamination at our site, on the landfill site proper, and if any contamination was moving off-site. And we'll talk a little bit more about the health consultation in the presentation. as the corrective measures, which we'll go into in depth, part of the corrective measures was capping those existing disposal areas. Another part was phytoremediation, which means using plants, in this case trees, to try to remedy any leachate issues that you have at a landfill. So you can see over 2,000 trees have been planted since 2000 to help fight any leachate issues in existing disposal area 1 and 2. In December of 2004, even though it says methane, we did dig a trench along Dunlap Road. And methane can travel through soil levels. So a trench, essentially what we did was dig a hole. A lot of times when you're digging methane trench or cutout trench, what you're trying to do is stop or prohibit methane from traveling further through the soil levels or through the soil. Sometimes it's filled with rock and it acts as a vent. So it's a block so that methane won't leave the property and vents the methane for you. So it's a passive vent. And why that's important, because methane can actually contaminate groundwater. And so we were having readings in methane monitoring well 3 or 4, Brad? 3. And that's what led to the trench along Dunlap Road. May 2005, existing disposal area 1, we have a ditch at the southeast corner, perpendicular to Dunlap Road. That trench acts similar to, that ditch acts similar to the trench, except for groundwater. That ditch was there to prevent groundwater from moving off-site. And so that's what that ditch was there and formed in 2005. The methane vent in the EDA ditch were staff suggestions to help prohibit methane from leaving the property and to prohibit groundwater from leaving the property. 2012, our landfill gas capture system was put into place. Some of you were on the commission at that time and were out at that ribbon cutting. But we actually now have a methane station out there that generates electricity, and that third-party company that operates that program for us sells that electricity to Rail EMC. So that's been in place since 2012. We also had another process we call it a FIN process, that stands for Facilities Issues Negotiation, where we brought representatives from Oglethorpe County and Athens-Clarke County, citizens and elected officials, and staff to discuss, in this case, Phase 5. Phase 5 is still under construction, should be done any moment, and that's where we'll bury trash going forward in Phase 5, which is in Oglethorpe County. In December 2012, we had to do the major modification for Phase 5. It was approved by EPD. 2016, Atlantic Coast Consulting, our landfill consultant, had a status of the remedial action, the corrective actions that we've taken to date for groundwater improvements. And then these last few are just for your information. Construction began on Phase 5 last fall. Our last load in Area 7, Phase 3, if you've been going to the landfill or if you go to the landfill to dispose of waste, you've been going to what we call Area 7, which is in Phase 3, right past the scale on the left. We actually sent our last load up to that area on July 20th. And then July 22nd, we went back to Area 6, which is in Oglethorpe County, in Phase 1. So just to let you know, I'm just trying to confuse you with Phase 1, 3, and Phase 4, just to let you know, is the compost pad. Just so you don't think that we skipped a phase, we took Phase 4 and turned it into the composting operation. That would have been potentially Phase 4 of landfill. And then the end of August, hopefully any day, we'll have Phase 5 open, cell 1A and 1B. And again, that's going to be in Oglethorpe County. So let's go a little bit further into some of these points. First, though, just so you know what we're talking about, you can see Athens-Clarke County landfill there. This is just Google. I'm hoping that this would work. I don't see the pointer. Hold on, let me get the pointer. Okay, the landfill property, just to get your bearings, right here you can see Billups Grove Baptist Church, so that's Lexington. The main road, the only road into the landfill is off of Lexington. Our compost pad is right here, where the red dot is. You go on up and you'll hit the scale house, and then you'll hit where we were burying trash right here. This is that Area 7 that I was speaking to. And then you get up here to where our red building, our material recovery facility is, our landfill gas station right here. And then this big area right here is EDA 1. Yep, and this is EDA 2, where their laser pointer is right here. So just to kind of show you, also to show you, this is Dunlap Road, and then you can see it actually goes into Dawson, and I apologize, it's cut off at the top, just to kind of give you perspective where the landfill is located, just in case you haven't been out there for a while. And I do want to give you just a little bit of a landfill lesson. I have the posters for you. I always try to come bearing some gifts. So we made you a miniature poster of how a landfill is constructed. We also have video footage coming of Phase 5 construction. Jeff, in Public Information, they were nice enough to put cameras out there, so we'll have some action footage of a landfill construction. But right now you have this poster, and it shows you how what we call Federal Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, we call it RCRA for short. It was an act enacted by Congress back in 1976, and in Subtitle D of that act, it gives the United States guidelines on how to build a municipal solid waste landfill. In Georgia, our Georgia Solid Waste Management Act of 1990 adopted RCRA standards. And so all landfills built after that time had to be in municipal solid waste landfills, because we have C&D, construction and demolition, and inert landfills. But municipal solid waste landfills had to be built to RCRA standards. This poster shows you how a landfill is built to RCRA standards. You start with compacted clay, and if you're lucky enough to have compacted clay, you have to have a density test to make sure that compacted clay is dense enough. If it's not, bentonite has to be added, and so that's the first step of every landfill. Dig a hole, and then compact the clay, or place compacted clay in, sorry, thank you. Mayor Kurtz, we hand out this out one more thing.
Absolutely.
Then the next level, or the next layer of your landfill going up would be what we're handing out to you after they compact that clay or add compacted clay to the proper density. Then you're going to have to line that landfill with a high-density polyethylene plastic. So you guys get a very special piece of high-density polyethylene landfill liner from our very own landfill. We didn't remove it from the landfill. It's from excess that they use to line it. This is the same type of plastic. Polyethylene is the same type of plastic your milk jug, potentially, if you use plastic at home, is made out of. But of course, it's a thicker mill. It comes in sheets, and then the sheets have to be welded. We call it welding, plastic welding of the seams together, so that it creates a barrier for leachate to escape the property. So after the landfill liner, then you would have a piece of fabric mat, geotextile mat. It feels and looks like a piece of felt in many cases. And then that felt is there to protect the liner. And then after that, you put, typically you put your perforated pipes in for leachate collection. You have to collect leachate. I didn't bring you any leachate to partake with tonight. That's garbage juice. Didn't figure you'd want that. But the leachate actually goes to that the layer above both the geotextile mats and the landfill liner. And typically it's got gravel surrounding it, so leachate could move to the perforated pipes and leave that cell or that area completely. After the leachate area, you also have more compacted clay before you even start burying trash. So there are several liners or barriers between our garbage and the surrounding area if you're building to RCRA standards. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. There seemed to be a lot of questions at one of the last commission meetings. And you got a poster out of it too. All right, moving on to the first landfill agreement back in 1992. The first landfill agreement meeting with Oglethorpe County residents, Oglethorpe County elected officials, Athens-Clarke County elected officials, and staff and representatives from that area. What we had to determine was we knew we had some groundwater issues out under those existing disposal areas. And so we went into this landfill agreement knowing we had to come up with some ways to fix what we call a leachate plume that was underneath that unlined landfill. And so a leachate plume would be a leachate that has constituents that could contaminate groundwater. So we had to find out exactly where the plume was headed. We had to determine where the plume was. So there were a lot of temporary wells put in to find out where the plume was. We had to test a lot of wells on site, on the property, and wells off the property. And the reason actually it was discovered that we had groundwater contamination, we used to have a staff member that lived on the property with their children. And you'll see in that health consultation, I do have a copy for you guys if you'd like, or I can send it to you. The health consultation talks about that particular staff member living on the property, and the reason they found contamination is the water smelled funny. That well was on landfill property, and they had been using it to bathe and drink, and it had contamination in that well. And then that's what triggered the investigation on where this contamination was coming from, and that's when we discovered the plume. They had to isolate the plume, and then they had to figure out how they were going to deal with the plume moving forward. I wanted to make sure we stayed ahead of it so that we wouldn't have any groundwater contamination leaving the landfill property. So at that time, we within 500 feet of the landfill boundary, solid waste was asked to do a private structure and well inventory. So we determined how many people were on well water in the Dunlap Road area, and how, of those wells, which ones were being used, which ones were being used by like a permanent structure. So that inventory was done. And along with that inventory, there were testing done at that time, and the testing did indicate contamination on the property, but not off of landfill property. But the way the plume was moving, which was moving towards Dunlap Road, we wanted to make sure we did the private structure, the well inventory, tested those wells, but then we wanted to have excess buffer. So we ended up purchasing property, which we'll talk about in a second as well. We ran water lines. Water lines were constructed because we knew we wanted to encourage and take people off of those wells that would be close to where the plume could travel if it left the landfill property. That water line was constructed, and the extension to that area, including Billups Grove Baptist Church, all the extensions were completed by January 1st of 1995. And then the Landfill Enterprise Fund paid public utilities for the meters, the stubs, the backflow preventers, all the devices needed, the pavement cuts, and the GDOT permits for that construction. And the Landfill Enterprise Fund also paid property owners for well closures. We had right around 20, a little over 20 well closures, and we paid also those residents, we paid them the present value at that time of 15 years of water use. So that's what was paid at that time for any homes within 500 feet of the landfill boundary. Between 500 and 1,000 feet of the boundary, we tested the wells, and we made arrangements to do that within 60 days of the citizens' agreement. No expense to the property owner, and all the tests were again paid by the Landfill Enterprise Fund. If the well quality tests failed, we would do the same thing that we did for those homeowners within the 500-foot boundary. And then annual tests were required thereafter upon request from the residents. So that was between 500 and 1,000 feet, and then greater than 1,000 feet from landfill property, the same provision as within 500 feet apply. If the well water is unacceptable according to state regulations, then we would follow the 500-foot landfill boundary citizen agreement, and test failure caused by landfill contamination, then of course we would have provided an alternate drinking supply for those residents in the 500 or 1,000 and over 1,000 if there was contamination in the wells. There were not, just want to emphasize, which we probably didn't put this in here enough, we did not find contamination off-site in those wells, but we did close down. We did close down some of the wells, paid those residents. We did find contamination of the soil in one property owner's home. That soil came back as motor oil, and that particular resident often changed their oil at home and then dumped the oil on their property. And so that's from that's from one piece of property that we ended up purchasing. Here is the map. We attempted, I can send this, GIS helped us with this map. What they tried to do here is work with public utilities, and all of the yellow dots or the yellow triangles are active water meters with public utilities. So you can see a tremendous amount of customers off Dunlap Road, and on the other side of the landfill as well are public utilities customers. The blue arrows are water wells, active, or what we think are active water wells. Wells are a little bit harder. They don't get inspected by public utilities. This is the wells as the health department had that information for our GIS office. So you can see where there are still, as far as we know, active wells around the landfill property.
So, Suki,
Yes.
so as far as we know, on the Athens-Clarke County side, there's only one active well.
Looks like two. There's one up on the top there.
That's over the county line, right? Oh, but that one is that still within the testing boundaries that we were doing?
That one was.
That one was,
within,
okay.
yeah. Again, we tested the wells, and the resident could choose, because we did not find any contaminants.
Right.
I will tell you, after your last meeting, we had residents call and asked us specifically, they did not want to be on public water. They felt like, I think Athens Banner Herald picked up an ad or the news story, and so there are folks that chose to stay with their well that were right off the buffer area. So but there's one well on this map that we found that we know of for sure, according to GIS.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, groundwater corrective action. This was for EDA, existing disposal area 1 and 2. These were items that EPD had recommended these items, but then also staff had done some above and beyond to mitigate that plume or that groundwater contamination that we knew was coming from EDA 1. Again, both of those landfills, the existing disposal areas were capped and closed. That was the first recommendation that was done. Gas collection and control system. We have roughly 43 gas extraction wells that were installed around EDA 1 and 2, and that prevents the methane from traveling through and contaminating the groundwater more. And we told you that we do generate electricity with that gas. Phytoremediation, where plants, we used approximately 2,000 different trees. This action uses natural processes to extract the water, or we hope that it extracts the water from groundwater and degrades any contaminants that might be there, and transports the contaminants, stores them, or transports the chemicals in the roots and woody parts of the plant. Phytoremediation is never done, though. Trees die, trees get old, and so that's something that is ongoing. We can't check the box off. It's kind of one of those boxes, yes, we planted 2,000 trees, but it's going to be ongoing to make sure that it continues to do what it's supposed to do around EDA 1 and 2. Staff-driven corrections, I told you about the constructed ditch around EDA 1 on the south side that's perpendicular to Dunlap Road. That was staff-driven to provide a barrier between that groundwater contamination and Dunlap Road. We also did that trench I told you about, even though it was constructed to stop methane. Methane can cause issues in groundwater, so that was a staff-driven correction as well. It was also suggested from the third party, the Department of Health report, that we purchase additional properties that would be worst case scenario if the plume left the landfill property. So there were 12 tracts of property. I think it said 10 to 11 in your original PowerPoint. It is 12 tracts of property I found in the final report. And those properties were adjacent to the landfill, and that provides an additional buffer around EDA 1 so that we can control the plume in a worst case scenario issue if the plume left the landfill buffer, the landfill property proper. The Department of Health did a third-party groundwater report as well, and I have it for you guys, and I can give it to you digitally if you need it. It's from 2000, and it talks about the staff issue that prompted and catapulted the groundwater contamination into the light. It demonstrated we had an issue with groundwater. And then it also went further and it tested the wells out there and found, again, no contaminants off the property. and it gives its full report. If you need it digitally, just let me know. It was done, like I said, it predates my time, but we did find that, and we felt it was important, especially since it was the Department of Health. They also brought in the local Department of Health. They brought in several entities you can read about in the report to do the consultation and focused on the Dunlap Road area. Whoop. Groundwater monitoring, we're going to get in a little bit more. We had 48 groundwater monitoring wells, but now I had to make a correction. Chris Klamke pointed out we have a total of 68 with our new phase that is not yet open. So we'll have 68 groundwater monitoring wells on our property. We do semi-annual testing for the analysis of Appendix 1, volatile organic compounds, which Chris is going to talk more about. And metals, and a subset of wells are sampled for Appendix 2 testing analysis, which Chris is going to talk about, and it's once every 5 years. We got it changed from once every 3 years to once every 5 years. And Chris is going to go over the next slides with you. He is our geologist. He is with our landfill consultant, Atlantic Coast Consulting, so he can give you more information about the newest testing and go further in depth on Appendix 1 and Appendix 2 testing. So, Chris, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. I like an open forum, so if anybody has any questions about anything I go over, please feel free to interrupt. But I'll try to give you a quick overview of the groundwater monitoring program and the results and just some of the basic science behind how all this was developed. I always think a picture's worth 1,000 words, so I like to start with something visual. You may not have seen a well network map before or one for this site. So what we've done is taken the site plan, and I apologize that PowerPoint and AutoCAD don't play well together, so it's a little bit fuzzy, but the general picture that we're trying to get across here is we've highlighted the groundwater monitoring wells in blue. So you can see it's a perimeter monitoring network that goes all the way around the landfill. There are internal wells also that serve assessment functions for the various disposal units. They're labeled, the Phase 1, Phase 2, EDA 1, EDA 2 are labeled on there, but they may be hard to discern, and we can get you another clear copy of this if you need it electronically. So the main purpose of this is to show, you can hear 68 monitoring wells, but seeing it in plan view kind of helps you understand how the distribution is. The blue arrows are there to show you, it's a little more complicated than this, but the primary groundwater flow direction is to the west. It is radial in some areas. Dunlap Road, it wraps around a little over there, or wraps internally in the center of the site. But overall, the generic flow is to the west towards Big Creek. So we just wanted to point that out. A little bit of information about how these networks are developed. Now, these are phased in. They're not put in all at one time because the landfill is phased over time. So some of the characterization information that we have to determine where groundwater is, where is it flowing, how deep is it, comes through the studies that EPD make us do while you're designing the landfill. So we identified the primarily westward flow. We determined through these studies that the flow rate is pretty low at this site, only about 3 feet per year, and that's variable depending upon where you're at. But that's a pretty slow average. The aquifer system is unconfined, which is typical in the Piedmont that we're in. It's in some pretty dense weathered soils that are derived from the bedrock, and there is some fracture flow in the bedrock surface, but it's all moving pretty slowly. So when we did the study for the Phase 5, we did some seasonal studies there, and of course there's a lot of backlog of monitoring results from the 90s when the original wells were put in. It really only fluctuates in elevation around 9 feet, up and down between the wet season and the dry season.
Chris, I think Andy here had a question.
And this may be, maybe you don't have an answer to this. So, we know that the climate is getting drier, and we know that we're having less rain than we used to, and that's obviously affecting I'm assuming, the refill rates on the aquifer. Is there any evidence that that's affecting the groundwater flow rate?
Not as much here. We have seen that impact some areas, especially if there are active borrow pits that are being dewatered nearby. It kind of exacerbates that process. You have the long-term dryness that impacts it slowly, and then you add some pumping to that, and you can really pull the water table down. This one's been more stable. There's some water levels that are dropping some, but they're still monitorable as far as the way the network's designed. So it's something that we can keep an eye on over long periods of time as we're monitoring these programs. Groundwater depth ranges from around 14 to 40 feet, 14 feet being on the creek side down in the lower elevation, 40 feet being on the higher elevation side. And again, that's pretty typical. Groundwater surface typically mimics topography. When you construct landfills over that, it changes it a little bit because it changes where groundwater recharges, but for the most part, it does mimic topography as it moves towards the creek.
Melissa?
Yes.
Yeah, is there ongoing monitoring of the creek itself?
Yes.
I mean, I assume a lot of that water ends up in the creek.
Yep, there absolutely is, and there's 8 surface water monitoring points on the site to monitor water quality coming on and going off the site. And I've got another slide where I highlight some of that stuff there too, but that is part of the monitoring program, surface water and groundwater. There's also methane monitoring too, but I didn't really get into that with this since we're focusing on groundwater, but that's another portion of the environmental monitoring at the site. So this aquifer characterization is what went into the design of that network. So again, we mentioned the 68 wells. There's a lot of wells around there. They're monitored twice a year for what EPA has designated the Appendix 1 parameter list. That's a list of chemical analytes that get sampled. There's the 8 surface water locations that monitor water coming on and going off, monitoring water that comes out of the ponds. There's a subset of 14 wells that have a couple extra parameters of nitrate and mercury for the compost facility. And then there's a that when you detect the constituents in Appendix 1, and we have to statistically evaluate those, when a significant increase is detected in those Appendix 1 parameters, which is a short list, that bumps you up to the Appendix 2 list, which is a much larger list of compounds. And I'll show you a demonstration of the difference in that in a minute. When you start Appendix 2, because of that significant increase, you do it annually. You build a database of information, and then you can make a case if those parameters are not detected to do an alternative frequency, which is what's happened here, and we've been able to get it up to a 5-year frequency rather than annually. Another visual here, it always helps out. There's Appendix 1. It's 4 bottles of 62 compounds and metals. Once we get an increase in those compounds, it ups the ante to Appendix 2, and now you're talking almost 30 bottles that have to be filled at each well. Over 200 compounds are analyzed for. And anytime that the number goes up, the lab charges more. This is like 5-6 times the cost of Appendix 1 monitoring. So you need an effective corrective action program to minimize this and the impact to the environment. So as I said, we're sampling that every 5 years versus twice a year for the Appendix 1. The majority of the detections that have occurred are in the Appendix 1 variety of volatile organic compounds. Those have been the primary constituents of concern. So that's what was focused on for the corrective actions. This graph just shows you the number of groundwater protection standard exceedances that occurred back in late 2000-ish range. Groundwater protection standards are developed by EPA, and we have to compare the laboratory detections that we get to those values. So we had in 2008, 15 protection standard exceedances. The capping and the phytoremediation, we're starting to work that trend down. And then in 2011, when the gas control system was brought online, you can see a dramatic decrease in exceedances and volatiles. That just demonstrates how important it is to control landfill gas at these sites. It really will impact groundwater. So that gas system made a huge difference in exceedances. And then now, if you look all the way out to 2019, there are actually 0 volatile organic compound exceedances at the site. So what can you take away from that? Number one, the monitoring system was designed and functions properly to assess impact to the environment at this site. Number two, the corrective actions that were designed and implemented were effective, and we're now at no exceedances for volatile organic compounds. And that leaves us at a point now where we just need to continue to effectively maintain those corrective actions and monitor and stay on top of the monitoring to make sure something doesn't change. But right now, the trends are looking very favorable out there. So anybody has any other questions on the groundwater monitoring part of it? I'll turn it back over to Suki.
Thank you, Chris. All right, that brings us to phase 5. This is our final citizens agreement that we still are under. We still follow the 1992 citizens agreement as well as the 2012. 2012 brought us back together, Oglethorpe County again, residents, elected officials, Athens, elected officials, residents, and staff came together through a series of meetings through the Facilities Issues Negotiation process, FIN process. And here's what was agreed to after the series of meetings, that we would test all drinking water wells again within a 500-foot boundary within 6 months of the permit date, the permit for phase 5, that expansion that we're doing right now. The FIN group can select 6 additional wells between 500 and 1,500 feet of the boundary to have tested as well. We tested for the full array of Appendix 2 parameters plus fecal for a baseline data in that area. If the landfill contamination detected in landfill monitoring wells along Dawson Road, this is what this agreement covers, Dawson Road, because phase 5 is closer to Dawson Road in Oglethorpe County. Of course, ACC would report to EPD, and we would also go through the same process that we established in 1992, that if there was contamination in any of the wells along Dawson Road, that we would close those wells for that resident, also pay them that 15 years of water use at present value, and then put them on county water system. So we haven't had to do that to date. Again, we don't have any landfill contamination at that property off Dawson Road, but we also haven't started using phase 5. So this is looking towards the future to protect those residents from anything that could happen into the future in phase 5. And just a quick summary, again, I know some of you were really concerned about contamination levels off the landfill property, and we did not have any, although the plume was discovered on the site that was traveling towards Dunlap Road, and we did bring the citizens together and staff in 1992, again in 2012, set parameters in place so that we could take care of contamination if it exited our property. In 1992, there was soil contamination found, though. I do want to be open with you. If you saw on your record, we did have soil contamination on one piece of property. We now own that piece of property, and it was dumped from motor oil from people that changed their oil on the property. And currently, staff still follows both 1992 and 2012 agreements when we're dealing with groundwater around the landfill. And anytime a resident wants testing, all they have to do is typically they call Brad, and Brad will actually get that tested for them. I think the latest, Commissioner Davenport asked us, and we did we will work through UGA, Cooperative Extension, does a battery of testing, and so I did send that test, kind of everything that you could have tested for by UGA, and we would pay for that. It's for Commissioner Davenport to give to Phillips Grove Baptist Church. So do you remember the last time somebody asked you to do a test, Brad? I don't know if you could hear that. At least 10 years ago, somebody asked him to test a well on the periphery, or was it on Dunlap? Or
Dunlap,
okay,
yes.
Thank you. And again, we will continue doing that upon request, or it will test any wells that are still out there for residents, or do anything else that you want us to do out there in that area. But we just wanted to make sure you understood how landfill's built, what we've done to date to mitigate groundwater contamination on our property. We wanted to make sure you understood what had gone on. I think I wasn't here at the meeting, but I do have a list of concerns that you guys had, and I tried to hit all of them. The only one I didn't hit, I just want to bring it full circle because Deborah Lonan gave me the list, was I know you guys wanted us to engage the homeowners out there. Before we engage the homeowners, I wanted to make sure you understand what has been done so far on the property. And then I would be happy to do whatever you guys ask, staff would, but I wanted to make sure you understood what has gone on and what 2 citizen agreements we are currently under prior to any next steps as far as going out there and talking to Dawson Road or Dunlap Road. And I will tell you the only calls we've had concerning the last conversation about groundwater were 2 residents out there that we know. One lives on Lexington proper. They were vocal about not wanting public utilities water. They wanted to keep their well. So that's the only 2 that we've heard from recently.
are the, with the two the citizens committee, how are those people selected?
Brad, I wasn't a part of either one of those, Commissioner Thornton. How are any of the folks that were part of that, how are they
The
selected?
Joint Solid Waste Committee. Volunteers were requested from commissioners who knew homeowners in that area.
I forgot to hand out this earlier.
Thank you.
Melissa?
So I haven't heard anything about the status of contamination of the creek. Do you have any reports on that? I mean, it's being tested, but how does it fare?
Yeah,
Chris.
we do. That's part of the semi-annual testing that's done. Those reports are submitted to the state within 90 days after the event is completed, and currently there's no detections in the creek.
Okay.
But that's ongoing.
Are they multiple locations? Because
Yes.
I'm curious if it's being tested, you know, there's what appears to be a runoff pond. I mean, you look on Google Maps and it shows a stream feeding into Big Creek.
Yes.
From a runoff pond on the landfill property. And so I'm curious if the testing site is downstream from that, where that creek
And
comes
I'd
in.
like to, I can get you a map too that shows all the surface water points so you can see how they're configured on site. I didn't bring that with me since we were focusing on the groundwater, but we can do that so you can visually see where all the surface water points are. But they should be located at each one of those points where water would leave the site.
Okay, because it looks like that runoff stream,
I think it's an outfall from the pond.
it is
what
an
you're looking
outfall
at.
stream?
Yeah.
I mean,
From
it
the
shows
pond.
up
It's not
on
a-
Google Maps as a creek, but, I mean, that seems to converge with Big Creek, right, on the church property. So I'm concerned about that convergence point and that runoff, and it's right where the composting operation happens. You know, and there can be volatile, non-organic compounds in the composting, because you never know what ends up in the toilet. So yeah, I'd just like a little more information on that
Surface
convergence.
water, that area, is that what you're?
Yeah, how that runoff creek impacts Big Creek on the church property, what kind of compounds might be in it, because, you know, that's a heavily used property, and they have, you know, picnic tables and stuff right there by the creek.
Sure. We'll follow up with that.
Any other questions? Any other data or information folks would like solid waste staff or others to gather?
We can email Suki if we have further questions, right? You know,
Of course.
okay, all right.
All right, so Suki, you have a doubleheader tonight.
I do. It's all trash night.
Kind of based on earlier requests to kind of examine what a set of differently arrayed collection zones could look like. Suki's also put some information together regarding that.
All right. Again, I have a different set of experts in the audience. Corey Jones, can I recognize Corey Jones, expert over here, our collection administrator. And I did invite two of our larger haulers tonight. Republic could not be here. The regional manager of Republic had a procedure done on his heart and couldn't be here tonight. He was invited. But Waste Pro has kindly showed up because our two largest haulers are the only haulers in the county that have ever franchised. The smaller haulers, no offense to Curbside, AAA, and Jimmy Johnson, love them, but they haven't franchised. They haven't been a part of a franchise. Waste Pro and Republic do in many locations around Georgia, around the Southeast, and around the United States. So I just wanted them to speak on franchising in other communities. So Jerry Harrison with Waste Pro is here, and I'll call him up here, again, expert on franchising and where they do it in near us, and we'll actually talk a little bit about Gwinnett, where they have done a franchise. But yes, we're here to talk about solid waste collection zones, and Commissioner Harrod's probably already taking a pause with this, because my summary is accurate. I do want to say it has been painful for staff. I've only been with the county, it'll be 15 years in November. Twice in my 15 years, it was just murmured about franchising, and it brought out passionate people and their trash haulers. So I just want to kind of let you know that people are very kind of connected to their private haulers and public hauler, I'm happy to say. All right, we're going to go over our purpose, the history, what we're currently doing in solid waste collection in Athens-Clarke County, a little bit about what zoned solid waste collection could look like in Athens, summary, and any next steps that you want to give us or that are going on in Athens. Tonight we're going to discuss solid waste handling or hauling zones for each of our current residential franchise haulers operating in Athens-Clarke County and review the cost of service if Athens-Clarke County Solid Waste Department provided residential collection throughout Athens-Clarke County. Residential collection for any haulers listening out there, not commercial. Yes.
Suki, I have a question. If we only have 2 haulers that are franchised, we have several more that aren't.
No, we have they all have franchises with us.
Oh,
Only 2 of our 5 residential have been a part of what I would say zoned franchising outside of Athens-Clarke County.
Oh,
Sorry,
I see.
Commissioner
I see.
Neesmith. Outside of Athens-Clarke County. Yes.
So I think you said West Pro is here,
Yes, Commissioner Thornton, Waste Pro.
Waste Pro. And is that the same as Republic?
No. Republic and Waste Pro are our 2 largest private haulers that operate in the General Service District. They also operate all over Georgia, the Southeast, and around the United States. So they have been a part of what I would call true franchising. In Athens, we're really just permitting our haulers. I want to say, we call it franchising and in our ordinance, but we're really just saying, hey, you got a permit to operate in Athens-Clarke County.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
I was under the assumption that Republic brought out Waste Pro. That's
No.
Okay.
Really, the only consolidation of haulers we've had recently, Waste Pro bought F4 sanitation within the last few years. So we had one permit kind of go away with that. Waste Pro engulfed F4. And then what you will see movement on, and then advanced disposal. This is in the commercial realm. This has no impact on what I'm talking about tonight, residential, but just to let you know, Advanced bought out Oconee Waste Transport. What you'd see is OWT on boxes. So OWT, even though their boxes and trucks are still out there, they were bought out by Advanced. And nationally, Advanced looks like pretty close. Being bought out, done? Okay, done deal, I'm hearing from the private. They were bought out by Waste Management. So more than likely, Waste Management will own the ticket to come into Athens commercially through Advanced buying OWT.
okay.
Sorry about that. Yeah, a little bit of consolidation out there. All right, of course, I didn't start with the biggest. When the county unified back in the early 90s, garbage service, we had a tremendous amount of foot packers. My parents lived off Timothy Road, and they were very vocal. They liked their hauler and didn't want to change. They were part of the folks that didn't want to change and didn't want Athens Sanitation or Athens-Clarke County Solid Waste Department to move in the General Service District. Back in that consolidation period, we had over 15 haulers. A lot of them were mom and pop haulers hauling in their pickup trucks. You know, garbage, I remember at my parents' house, it was a pickup truck with some plywood sides that would pick up their garbage. So when we unified a lot of government services, but did not unify solid waste service. So I just wanted to let you know, and I'll talk more about that in a second. But just some other items that pertain to our private waste haulers and our public waste haulers ourselves. Back in 1994, the commission approved volume-based solid waste management system known as pay-as-you-throw, meaning the smaller trash can you have, the less you pay. The larger trash can, or if you have to have multiple trash cans, the more you pay. And then we actually, if you're a private hauler operating in Athens, you're supposed to offer those same 4 levels of service that Athens-Clarke County Solid Waste does as well. And it is part of commission-approved ordinance and policy. And that was approved for the General Service District in 1995. The year after we approved for the Urban Service District, we approved it for the General Service District. So we have pay-as-you-throw throughout Athens-Clarke County. In 2011, we changed a little bit. We heard from residents that they wanted a smaller container option. So in 2011, after the Solid Waste Task Force was formed and made recommendations, we created a fourth level, the little mini bin, 20 to 24 gallon roll cart can be picked up on your curb. It can hold one kitchen trash bag, and it's for either avid recyclers and composters or a very, very small family or one person. So we did add that, and that meant in the general service district and the urban service district. We also added rate differentials. The Mayor and Commission at that time approved rate differentials between a 20-gallon container and a 32-gallon container. It's supposed to be 10%. And then there's supposed to be a 10% again for the next two sizes, and then the next two sizes, and then the last two sizes. So we did create rate differentials for both the urban service district and the general service district. So that was another ordinance and policy that the Mayor and Commission approved in 2011. In 2011, we also rolled out the waste minimization fee, which was a mechanism that helped to or helps fund our recycling education and beautification programs in Athens-Clarke County. That waste minimization fee is paid for by our residents, 60 cents per month to your private hauler or to your public hauler. That goes into a fund for recycling education. And also, if you're a commercial entity, you pay $1.60 per month to your private hauler or public hauler, and that goes into the waste minimization fee. We collect about $200,000 a year from our waste minimization fee to help offset some of those costs. And November 7th, the 2012 Commission approved franchise solid waste hauler cap ordinance, which meant that we didn't want any more haulers to grow back to some of those older levels. We wanted to cap it, and that was because a lot of citizens at that time were complaining about having 4 and 5 and 10, between recycling and trash trucks in their communities every week. So multiple days of the week, I should say. So that cap is still in play. And actually, unless it falls down, I think by one more, we're still at a level we can add. Right now, if I wanted to start my own trash service, Suki's Trash Service, I could not start it in Athens-Clarke County. We will not issue a permit right now to anybody to haul trash for residential or commercial. The only exception are roll-offs. Roll-offs, actually, they can operate in Athens-Clarke County. They don't fall under any of these. They're protected by a state law. So, but residentially and commercial dumpsters and roll carts, we would not allow any new business to start up under the current cap. All right, Urban Service District, that's where Athens-Clarke County Solid Waste Department picks up residential customers. All those customers in the Urban Service District have to have trash service. There's no self-hauling there. So I just want to make sure you know that. And recycling is optional for residential customers, both in the Urban Service District or in the General Service District. And Athens-Clarke County Solid Waste Department, our collections division, each week collect trash and recycling from roughly 9,600 customers. That's our customer base. We do curbside and backyard service, mainly curbside. Backyard service is typically for our elderly customers or our disabled customers. They'll send in a letter from their doctor, we file that, and then we'll give them backyard service for curbside rate. And when I say backyard, we're not gonna, there are some fences, right? You still walk in some fences, and some carports, no longer underground. At one time we had actually underground storage containers. We don't do that, and you have to have it in a roll cart. We still want it in a roll cart now. We used to allow you to use whatever container you wanted. We tried to standardize so we could at least tell it was a trash can. Sometimes it was hard to tell what container was what in some of our backyard customer service areas. So that's our customer base in the Urban Service District. General Service District, we have residential haulers currently operating, and these are the residential haulers. AAA Sanitation, Curbside Services, Johnson & Son, Republic Services, and Waste Pro. We have 5 residential haulers. We do have a few additional commercial haulers, but those commercial haulers don't haul in the residential sector. That is roll-off systems. If you see roll-off systems, they are permitted to operate in Athens-Clarke County, and they only operate in the commercial sector. And we also have, it just went blank, roll-off, and what am I missing? Advanced, thank you. Advanced also operates in the commercial sector. Residents, this is a big deal too, what I'm about to tell you. Probably the biggest deal on here is residents in the general service district do not have to have trash or recycling service. That means they can self-haul, you know, to the landfill, to another person's dumpster, use another person's roll cart, you know, use our drop-off sites for recycling, so they can self-haul. We have approximately, according to GIS, 17,000 residential customers that are available in the general service district. That's according to our GIS office. And you'll see some number discrepancies in here because private haulers self-report. You can close your ears. I don't know how accurate some of the reporting is because it's not. We could have, maybe we do have over 5,000 self-haulers in the general service district. Seems like a little bit much, but that's what we're getting with what our GIS office tells us, residential structures we have versus how many the private haulers say they have as customers. So, and I put that in this.
Patrick had a
Yes.
So just, sorry, it's been a day. 17,000 residential customers are available for service and GSD. Means they don't have any of those five.
Well, no, some of them do. That's some, and you'll see their numbers coming up on another slide, Commissioner Davenport. So those 17,000, those 5 trash haulers compete for those 17,000 residential customers. But the numbers that the private haulers are giving us, there's still like over 5,000 customers that are self-hauling, according to the numbers we're getting from the private haulers and the number that our GIS office state that are residential units in the general service district. Yes.
So I guess 2 questions then. So we're calling it self-hauling, and if it's 5,000, it is a pretty large number. So at the I guess at the landfill, I mean, that'd be the only place legally they could be taking the trash. Recycles be drop off. Are we seeing any kind of actual usage at the landfill to show that there's 5,000 people self-hauling?
No. Now Saturday is our busiest day, people-wise. Brad would say. Saturday, I'm just going to say, Saturday landfill staff, it's a courtesy to our residents. We get very little tonnage on Saturday, so it literally is a courtesy to our residents to be open on Saturday. Mm-hmm. Monday through Friday is where we get the bulk of our tonnage because that's our commercial and residential haulers bringing in their trash and their trash, not recycling. So on Saturdays, theoretically, a lot of our self-haulers are hauling out there. But again, some of those are Oglethorpe County residents as well because we partner with the Oglethorpe County. But Oglethorpe County is a small amount.
But I'm guessing that our actual numbers are nowhere close to 5,000.
Well, and that's what we're a little concerned. Brad, did you want to? Okay. He's out there.
And that's what I would assume. So I guess that was just the term self-hauling haulers might not be the best term here. We would say that these are people who have opted out of, trash service either through the county or through a private hauler. So, I mean, these people also could potentially be burning trash, dumping trash, stuff like that too. Not necessarily hauling their trash.
Correct. And there are a couple pockets that, for example, Rivers Alive, we have to clean up pretty much people's backyards because they don't have to have trash service and they're clearly hauling their trash down an embankment and on a Georgia Power easement. So there are some pockets where we know where we're trying to get a hold of some of that illegal dumping.
Yeah.
So
Suki, they may also be sharing their neighbor's trash.
correct. Could be sharing a neighbor's that's paying for service. You're exactly right.
Or employer.
Or as
Gas station.
as a neighborhood I lived near one time that had a business closed down and the dumpster just filled up because everybody in the neighborhood was just throwing.
And I'll tell you anecdotally, some of our self-haulers and our apartment complexes would tell you they get hit by illegal dumping a tremendous amount, especially the ones that don't have an enclosure with like a lock or a keypad on it. For an example, the east side, some of those east side apartment complexes, Laurel Oaks, it used to be called Laurel Oaks. What's it called now, Corey? I can't remember. The Oaks. They have a tremendous issue with illegal dumping around those dumpsters. We service them. That's why we know that they have issues. So there are definitely issues with self-haulers, but some of those I wouldn't say hang my hat on all of the self-haulers. A lot of people are responsible and doing the right thing with their trash and recycling. Any other questions before I move off this slide? All right, and this map just kind of shows you where the urban service district is in that green blob, that the GIS, and they would hate me calling it a green blob, but that's where the urban service district is. That's where Athens-Clarke County Solid Waste operates. And then outside, you can see the densities, housing density, where our private haulers operate, or they have potential to operate. I just wanted to show you this slide. This is the current solid waste collection rates in the urban service district, from 20 gallon to, if you're really trashy or have a lot of people, especially college students, love having 6 folks in their places of residence. Sometimes they'll have multiple roll carts. So you can see our curbside monthly fee and our backyard monthly fee. And this is per month. These are our prices per month. We also did one further step because we're in the end of rush. And college students just see that price, $15.60. I was a college student once. If I saw $15.60, I'd be like, ooh, I want that 20-gallon roll cart, even though I have 6 people living in my house, because I can go out on the rest of the money, and enjoy that. We try to visually show them that unless they're avid composters and recyclers, still it'd be hard with 6 people to actually properly utilize that 21-gallon roll cart that we have, because part of our ordinance too states our collections division, Corey manages it, we will not pick up garbage outside that container. You have to buy a sticker. The stickers are $2. They don't physically have to be on there. But you have to call our office, and then if Corey's staff knows that you've paid for that extra bag, then our staff will pick up the bag. But if you haven't paid for that bag, our staff will go on. Otherwise, it defeats the purpose of a pay-as-you-throw system. A pay-as-you-throw system is encourage people to create less, recycle more, and compost. If you're not doing a true pay-as-you-throw by limiting what's outside the bin, then you're not really doing a pay-as-you-throw. So we do follow pay-as-you-throw strictly, and it shows you how many bags can fit in each container there. And Commissioner Harrod, did you have a question?
I do. So why not simply require people to put the sticker on the bag? I mean, that seems like an awful lot of work on your staff's behalf.
We do prefer it, but sometimes just going someplace. But we have tablets now, and Corey will tell you. We have
prefer and require are 2 different things, though.
Well, but they have to pay regardless.
Well, I get that, but I mean, then you've got to keep track of who has paid, who hasn't paid, and it just seems easier
Correct.
to just require that this.
And most of the time, do people have stickers on the bag, Corey, or most of the time they do not?
Some of them get stickers, most of them just call in and put it in a tablet.
They have tablets, though, Commissioner Harrod. Our staff do, and so really it's real time and our billing staff literally can send in when somebody calls. So it's really just a matter of seconds. But we certainly can honor visual stickers, but we have. Excuse me. Corey's right. Corey's saying you can't always see the sticker when it's on. The sticker is about 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. Well, maybe 2 inches by 2 inches. It's small. It's bright orange, but it's still a relatively small sticker.
What we've done in other locations is a blue bag or yellow bag program where you can buy these bags from local grocery stores, and they put them in everywhere, and you pay $4 for that bag, and that pays for the bag, or whatever it is, that pays for the bag and the waste, and that works really well.
Good. The sticker, the same concept. You're paying for the waste. The $2 is paying for the waste, the extra waste that you're producing that day. But everybody pays. It's just we don't require the sticker anymore because it's easier for a lot of folks now to pay with a credit card, like call our staff and charge it to their water bill, really. They can, our urban service district, we bill through the water bill. So you can call our office and we will just put your $2 fee on the water bill because our billing office has access to the water bills. Any other questions about how our fees are organized in the urban service district? All right, yes, sorry.
And you might, I think you've already talked about it a little bit, but could you reiterate again, like the private haulers are required to offer the same?
They are. We did give them, because different roll cart companies, providers, sellers of roll carts have slightly different gallon containers, so we gave them a range. 20 to 25 gallon is the first option, 30 to 35 gallon. Most of the time it's 32 is what you see, is pretty much industry standard. 60 to 65 gallon roll carts, or 90 to 96 gallon. Weirdly enough, that's a weird one. It's a 96 gallon roll cart. We gave them a range in case they used some roll cart company that had,
But they already, but they have to offer those.
They have to offer,
Okay.
according to county policy, yes.
Gotta talk to my own private hauler then.
And sometimes they're not as forthright, because I'm going to be honest with you, having this assortment of carts on hand is more expensive than if you just have 96-gallon carts. So I'm going to play devil's advocate for them. Is, if they can just buy in bulk 96-gallon roll carts for, a different color for trash, it's cheaper for them than having this assortment. Because we actually have to have multiple of all these because we don't know. Roughly, our most popular roll carts are 32 and 64. So we keep the bulk of 30, we know percentage-wise, our billing office knows percentage-wise how many 32 and 64 we should have on hand at any time, because that's our two most popular roll carts, so. Any other questions? This one? Just to show you our FY20 residential solid waste collection budget, it's about 1.6 million in our operating budget. And when I say solid waste administration and collections administration, we do a percentage of those two cost centers because solid waste administration contains me, collections administration contains Corey and his office staff, and those two line items or cost centers help not just residential waste and recycling, but also leaf and limb, litter techs downtown, commercial curbside, and dumpster customers. So we work it out by a percentage of customers out of those two line items, just if you were inquiring minds. Capital budget, just to let you know, this year we are buying 4 new, actually we've already ordered them. Corey's probably really excited. We've ordered 4 new automated trucks to replace 4 of the 6 automated trucks that we have. And 3 of the, we have actually 5 mini packers. We're replacing 3 of our 5 mini packers. So that's what we have for capital and operating. And then you can see the revenues that we took in fiscal year 19, just to show you, since we haven't finished FY20 yet, to know the amount of revenues that came in. And this is just for residential collection revenues. It was about 2.4 million.
Question.
Yes.
How old are those trucks? It feels like they were brand new just a couple years ago.
Well, they were brand new just a few years ago. Actually, 5 years ago to be exact.
5. They only have a lifespan of about 5.
Automated trucks, yeah. And the more, I will tell you, front end load, this past year, I think it's probably safe to say, Corey's bane of his existence were front end load trucks and automated trucks. The more hydraulics you have on a truck, the more trouble you're going to have with it. And I mean, we probably got extra. They're shaking. Thank you. They're shaking. Good cue. I will take you out to dinner later. And I'm just kidding. The more hydraulics, those trucks are problematic if the lifespan goes beyond 5 years. Quite frankly, 3 years is what was suggested by our past collections administrator, but we actually pushed them to 5.
They actually could, I mean, you could ride them into the ground, but I think it was determined that 5 years was optimal. It still had some value. We could sell it for surplus
Thank
and
you.
get some money
Yes.
back. Yeah.
Yes.
They still look good.
They do still look good, and we're hoping people will see
have some
that and want to
fancy trucks.
purchase them, and that will go back in into our budget to help pay for the new ones.
We'll buy them.
So right here, we'll talk to you after. So, no, I'm just kidding. I can't do that. So, but we will be putting those up for sale as soon as our new ones come in. Current staffing for this equipment. I just want to make sure you understand. We have 4 automated drivers, meaning CDL drivers. And I put this up here because it's really important for you guys to know. It is hard to find CDL drivers nowadays. It seems to be getting better. Corey had a few interviews this afternoon. But competing with over-the-road trucking is difficult at best. Over-the-road truckers can make a tremendous amount of money. And so if you're willing to take the hours and be away from your family, and then some of the over-the-road trucking are even make it attractive and better hours and times. So the last 1.5 to 2 years, our department, if we didn't have probably 2 to 3 gentlemen to take a tremendous amount of overtime, we would be suffering in automated residential collection. But because we have fantastic staff, we've been able to operate, and you probably haven't even noticed how short-staffed the collections division. Just to kind of put it in perspective further, I've been director now for 4 years. We have yet to have a full staff in collections. Corey, we can't tell you the last time we had enough CDL drivers to be in every truck. Our crew leader and our collections supervisors drive most of the time. I'm trying to drive the point. CDL drivers are hard if you're growing any department or division. So we have 4 automated drivers, 2 drive trash, 2 drive for recycling, yet we have 6 automated trucks. Because in trash, if you don't have backups, you don't have a truck. You have to have at least 1 backup for trucks. In this case, automated, we have 2. We want to make sure if we have 2 trucks go down. But I will tell you, this past year, Corey, we had 3 trucks go down, and our staff is so good. They came in early and stayed late and worked it out with 3 trucks. It just took a lot more time for them to do that. We have 2 mini packers drivers. Mini packers are non-CDL trucks, those little mini rear load compact trucks. We have 1 for trash and 1 for recycling for our backdoor service, and we have the other mini packers actually service commercial curbside downtown. So that's a separate cost center. We have 2 field customer service reps with 2 service trucks, pickup trucks with cages on the back. They deliver our roll carts for us, trash roll carts, recycling roll carts, and do any troubleshooting. Like if we have an area that's leaving their carts out too long, we try to help code enforcement by education first. Or if we have an area that's not recycling properly, the field customer service reps will go out and alter that behavior or attempt to alter the behavior. And we have 1 heavy equipment mechanic with 1 service truck, and then we have support staff across all cost centers. The director, collections administrator, operations coordinator, senior billing technician, collections supervisor, crew leader, utility driver. Utility driver is a backup person for all cost centers. So you have to have backup people. I think we might have our first utility driver in quite some time in Corey's interviews today as well, and an administrative assistant for the collections division. This is current staffing that makes our collections division as a whole run, and then specifically those first 2 bullets, and really the 3rd one as well, are specific to residential collection in the urban service district. So with that being said, here's our projected cost. I think Commissioner Denson wanted me to show what it would cost us if we took over the county. So we had staff estimate operating costs. We felt like we could operationally, it's not a tremendous amount more, but it's $2.5 million. This is all estimations, by the way. So that's our operating budget. But you can see the estimated capital cost to start a program, still just estimated, is $6.6 million. And we do not have that in the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund on hand to pay for that, just to let you know. But we could, of course, there is the GMA loan pool that you could use, except that there's typically only a $2 million, there's a $2 million limit on that, but our department also has access to bank loans, as you guys voted on for the Landfill Enterprise Fund earlier this year. So this is our estimate for operating costs and capital costs if you want us to service all of the customers, residential customers in Athens-Clarke County. Here's what we'd need for additional staffing. This is what the money gets you. 8 drivers for automated trucks. That would pick up recycling and trash. 4 drivers for mini packers. We're going to assume that we have some folks in the general service district that would need backyard pickup. Yes.
It'd be more.
It'd be more. In addition, yes, thank you. An additional heavy equipment mechanic, an additional field customer service rep. We don't have one right now, so it would be 1 part-time, no benefits administrative assistant to assist, 1 part-time, no benefit billing specialist. Those 2 positions currently don't exist, but staff didn't feel like we need full-time positions for those. 12 automated trucks, 7 mini packers, 1 service truck for the new mechanic, and 1 service truck for the new field customer service rep. So these would be in addition to what we already have, Commissioner Davenport. Yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
Could you send us by email what the pay for each of these positions would be?
I can. Is that what you're asking? Yes.
And Suki, I'm assuming that this staffing here is included in the $900,000 increase in operational budget, correct?
Correct.
Okay, yeah.
Suki, I don't see a line item for fuel.
We bundled them. If you want me to pull, I can pull it all out for you.
No,
if you
that's
want to
okay. I
see.
just want to be sure it was
Yeah,
included.
no,
So
we
included
bundled
in
everything in this first estimate. If you guys, what we thought is if you wanted more
in
information, we can.
operating costs? Is it in the operating cost
Yes,
side?
yes.
Are there hybrid garbage trucks available out there?
I've seen
in the
some.
world?
I don't know if there's a lot of CNG vehicles. So especially DeKalb County runs off CNG. Hybrid. You guys run Corey? Seen any? Have you guys seen any? CNG.
But could you harvest the landfill gas for that CNG?
Theoretically, DeKalb County, Augusta, they do harvest it. They produce a tremendous amount. They have a lot larger landfills than what we do. I'm not sure that we could. That would be a question for Brad or Shad. Do you guys know we could produce enough to fill a fleet?
We were told that
Okay.
You don't have
There we go. DeKalb County's, we only get, 300 tons of, I say that, I know it's a lot when we have to manage a landfill, but we get 300 tons per day. DeKalb and Augusta, I can't imagine how much tonnage they're bringing in, but they have CNG filling stations at those landfills for their fleet.
I mean, would it be cost effective to install those filling stations, even if you only filled for a fraction of the fleet, or half the fleet?
I think we'd probably have to look into it, Commissioner Link. I don't know what the cusp would be, where it would be in our financial best interest to fill some there, but you'd have to. I will say you'd want your fleet to all be either CNG or all be. Yeah, you wouldn't want. CNG trucks are a lot more expensive. I don't know how much more per truck. About 40 grand more per truck. So as well. So there's a truck expense, and then you would want to be able to fill, and if we couldn't fill them all at the landfill, that means we'd have to have another filling station to offset, but we could look into it. We could look into it if you'd like.
I'm kind of curious to see what the possibilities are.
Right. Here's just some projected cost and revenues with a potential expansion. Again, I just showed you our FY19 current urban service district revenue was 2.4. Estimated revenue with general service district only residentially was 4.1. That's with current rates. We were holding the rates current for this. But I will tell you, recycling's hurting. So that's in my next steps. I think we'd have to increase the rates to help recycling cover our recycling costs. So total estimated revenue would be about $6.6 million if Athens-Clarke County took over the general service district residentially and kept urban service district. You can then see our operating budget and then our estimated general service district operating budget. So our operating budget would be approximately $4.2 million for operating. This doesn't include, this doesn't include capital that we'd have to pay back as well. If we had a loan, I did not include all those terms in here. This is strict revenues versus operating costs, and we'd have to look at capital. And I could bring that back with a little more fleshing out with finance department. Okay. And just because you might be inquiring about it, just to show you how many accounts each hauler had. On average, these are the accounts that they have. Their monthly rates.
When were these numbers put together?
This would have been the last waste minimization. It would have been spring when they sent this in spring.
I would imagine curbside has shrunk and what Republic has, grown and Republic has shrunk since then.
I don't think our reports have come in yet, but when they do come in, we do see some differences, and we could see more in light of what's been going on in the general service district. But you can see the monthly rates. They are supposed to actually honor those monthly rates that they've given us on their waste minimization fee reporting form. And then there's comments just to show you that all of our private haulers are now charging for recycling. Recycling has increased tremendously. We pay, Athens-Clarke County pays because we have a contract with our current processor at our recycling facility, which happens to be Republic. We pay about $60 a ton to $90 a ton, depending on if it's single stream, it's going to be more expensive than if it's cardboard. Our private haulers are paying sometimes. Okay, they're paying that much to use our per ton to process recycling. So what our private haulers started to do was charge for bins or have a recycling charge per month. So I added that on that final comment section so you could see how it's impacting their services in the general service district with recycling markets being very low at best. It's been pretty awful when it comes to markets lately.
Two questions. Okay. Are the private haulers and our ACC getting much pushback from customers about paying the extra fee, or they are?
We've had some complaints come to us about private haulers charging for recycling, but we charge for recycling too. It's buried in the actual just monthly fee. That would be more of a question for a private hauler. I don't know what their pushback is. They probably get the first line of comments or complaints. I guess I can ask Waste Pro. You guys get comments about?
We did when we first rolled it out. We got a lot of complaints on it. It's a little better now because I think the communication and the education has gotten better. We really tried to send them documents letting them know what it was 2 years ago versus now. I mean, 2 years ago, we were getting paid to dump recycling, and now we're paying $198 a ton, $189 a ton.
And the second question, can you explain why it's important that we continue to recycle?
Yes, I can.
Versus going to our landfill?
Well, I think you have to look at it into the future, not just now. And you have to look at it beyond Athens borders. Recycling for every one job at a landfill, recycling, according to EPA, provides 15 jobs in local communities. So it's important if you're talking about job growth or job retention. Recycling provides a lot more jobs for a community. Economically, we have hundreds, about over 250 in the eastern United States, manufacturing facilities that solely rely on recycled products to make their product. In Georgia, 1/3 of all plastic bottles in the United States, 1/3 of all, number one plastic bottles, goes to Mohawk in the production of carpet or carpet padding. So they rely on our recycling to make their product. So although we might not see some of those benefits here locally, certainly to the Georgia economy, to the southeastern economy, and then jobs in our own community. The last time we did a job survey, Brad does employ 13 folks at a landfill, but in recycling in Athens, in all realms, including OmniSource, we had about 107 jobs in Athens that were directly related to recycling. Not indirect, but like haulers that were hauling only recycling. OmniSource, who's a scrap recycler in Athens. So we did that survey just to see how many jobs in Athens were provided directly due to recycling. So those are two. Recycling should never have been touted as a moneymaker. Anytime you have humans in a truck picking it up on the curb, taking it somewhere, more humans separating and equipment, all those steps cost money. But recycling didn't start from tree huggers. It started, in the late 1800s. We had rag pickers and metal collectors because there was a value in those materials when they were thrown out the window, left in the streets. So rag pickers and metal pickers would pop up, pick up those resources because they were raw materials, they knew they were, and would sell them to manufacturing facilities that wanted them to make new products. So I think I'd like to tout the economics globally, locally, and statewide and nationally. And we're hoping, we just had one of our staff members go up to Washington, D.C. to speak to a recycling caucus on what the federal government could do to help recycling in the United States. So we're pretty excited about some of the legislation that could help, including grants for local and state governments to expand or help recycling infrastructure. I don't know if that answered your question. I could talk longer, Patrick. Commissioner Davenport on recycling, but I don't, I know you guys have to eat dinner, and Commissioner Link has a comment, I think.
Well, there was, just last week, they announced a huge glass factory opening in Valdosta. Will that impact the problem we've had with glass recycling?
Well, here's
the need to get rid of our
problem with
glass?
glass isn't the problem with the end market. We've had an end market. We have one of the strongest
It's just
end markets.
expensive to haul.
It's expensive to haul, and also with the rise of single stream, when you mix it in and you've actually
Breaks.
send it through a glass crusher where you have brown glass, clear glass, which we call flint, and green glass, all in the same, goes through the glass crushers, chips it up to about 2-inch pieces or less. It's called a 3 mix, where all those colors are mixed up, and the value is not there. When we were sorting it by color, we were still making money using the same end market that we use today. Since we're not sorting it by color anymore, and we're sending it to the same end market we've been using for 25 years probably, strategic, it's not as clean as it used to be with single stream, and we're not separating it by color anymore.
Would it be worth it to start separating it by color
Potentially.
again?
There are places in the United States that are going back to dual stream collection. There are places also that are we're starting to hear, now I don't know if I've seen it yet, doing some sortation of glass. Maybe, have you heard of anybody actually sorting it back? No.
What I was actually going, if I could interject, one thing we found in the market is, and not here, but in the market is limit what you recycle. and it makes it the value of it, like your question is it valuable to recycle? It is, but only certain commodities. What happens is glass contaminates or certain other stuff contaminates other commodities and makes them not worth it.
Oh, next time you speak,
I'm sorry.
you gotta come up here so you can be on camera. Sorry, that's all
You
right.
won't
Not, well, again, does he need to say that again? Okay. So yes, and then we're starting to see glass being kicked out of curbside programs, and that's something that we are considering. We're gonna be renegotiating our contract either with Republic or sending our facility out to bid, just depending on what we do in the next 6 months. We will be, I'll just lay it on the table, we will be conversing about glass, keeping it in, booting it out, or potentially taking it at the charm, hand sorted color, and just avid recyclers will be the only ones that bring it to us by and large. And looking at 3 through 7 plastics. A lot of places are throwing out 3 through 7 plastics because they're hard to market right now. So 1s and 2s are your bread and butter. They always have been. Metals, steel, aluminum, and then some paper grades, mixed paper. We're struggling. Mixed paper is when you have what's left of newspaper, office paper, when you're not mixing, when you're not separating it. We are seeing a tremendous amount of cardboard, the Amazon effect. 60% of our incoming tonnage is cardboard, and it usually has that smiley face on it. So got a lot of Amazon boxes at the processing facility.
I always wonder if my wife's still alive if I show up and there's not a box on her doorstep.
I guess first I just wanted at least I think we've talked about this in the past that there is the value outside of monetary value, like Commissioner Davenport brought up, of us continuing to recycle these things for the environmental value that we see. Of course, we do have to balance that out. As when is it that value, but on building on those questions, do we have numbers for the general service district customers? What percentage of them actually opt into recycling and pay for that through their private haulers, since that is an optional?
Oh, in the private hauler realm? Is you're
Yeah.
asking how many opt on? You know what? We do not ask that on the reports that the private haulers do. So I do not know, but we potentially could ask them
Okay.
how many are. I don't know. Would that be an easy number? I mean,
I mean,
the question was, they want to know how many, come up here for the answer. How many folks recycle of your customer base in general
out of
service?
Athens-Clarke County alone, we probably recycled 500. It's not a lot, especially since we started charging, we've lost a lot. It's minimal here.
Okay. And you guys
And
have.
it depends on the area too, so you go to some areas and they're diehard recyclers and some just don't do it.
Okay, and so you're saying about around 500 you'd estimate for Athens-Clarke County?
Yes, sir. I would.
Out of
His base.
Out of my base, out of the
How many is that?
2,200.
2,200, right? So we're talking less than 25% of people.
Yes, a quarter.
So that's concerning. And then in the urban service district, though, recycling is mandatory, correct, Suki?
No, it is
It's
not. Not residentially.
Not residentially, it's not.
No, we don't have mandatory residential recycling in the urban service district or general service district.
Okay.
We average about 650 trash cans picked up with automated, 450
What Corey's saying is per day, we have 650 trash cans picked up per day on average and 450 recycling roll carts picked up per day. So out of our 9,600 customers.
Okay, and so with the urban service district customers then, because I don't think I saw, what is the extra fee then to opt into recycling?
We don't have an extra fee, it's embedded in the monthly fee, trash fee.
So if somebody has a 20-gallon can and no recycling, they pay the same amount if they have a 20-gallon can and recycling?
You got it.
I'll note, as a 20-gallon can user, the reality is that they give us the 64-gallon recycling bin, and so sometimes I don't have to put that out every week. So I'm sure that accommodates for at least some proportion of what Corey's describing.
Right,
It might
right.
be higher than that number. in
Correct,
the
and a
case.
lot of people, because we have, I want to, sorry, Mayor Gertz, I'm going to correct you, it's a 96-gallon recycling container.
Thank you.
Sorry, yes. But some people don't put them out as frequent as they did the 18-gallon bins. So what Corey's stating is
Yeah.
he's picking up that on average, but some people are only putting out every other week because they have a much larger container than they did with the 2 bins.
Okay, I would love to see numbers then of what percentage of the urban service district customers
are recycling have recycling bins at least.
Okay.
And what percentage of our private haulers, customers are opting into recycling? Of course, there's an extra fee there, so that probably is being a little more inhibitive, but.
Well, I think it's also important that I don't have my private hauler pick up my recycling. I take it to
The drop-off
to the
sites.
drop-off site out at the jail. So I think it's important not to assume that just because somebody doesn't have pickup with a private hauler that they're not recycling, because that's not the case.
I don't think we can assume that of all, but it's going to be one of the closest ways that we can get an estimate of how many people are.
Not necessarily.
The closest way. If you can figure out a closer way, I would love to
What
do
I
that
can
too.
bring back to you is I can bring back the percentage that they do. We can definitely do our percentage, but we can also show you the tonnages at the drop-off site by drop-off site. We actually have all that data as well, how much tonnage comes in at the drop-off sites. The highest producing drop-off sites are the mall, the tag office, and Jefferson Road.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Any other questions about urban service district or Athens-Clarke County Solid Waste taking over the county? I just laid out the numbers for you there and then gave you general service district numbers for comparison. One of the alternates to municipal solid waste collection is having a private hauler have their own franchise area. Now, I will say, we call our haulers franchised haulers. We use that term pretty loosely because really we should probably just be calling them permitted haulers. In a true franchise situation, you'd be sending out a RFP to get bids on different zones. So we really probably should call them permitted haulers, but we do call them franchise. But if we wanted to do franchising in Athens, franchise zone collection systems is when a municipality establishes zones and then create exclusive contracts with a hauler within each zone. Some communities opt to have one hauler for the entire county or city. Some haulers do divide it up into pie pieces and have different haulers. So I want to emphasize that before Waste Pro just comes up and talks briefly about Gwinnett County, if you don't mind, or about franchising. We can use our current private haulers, or we can attempt to, and split it up with the current private haulers. So I just want to make sure that's being said, that we would like to use the current private haulers that we have, but a true franchise is when you break the community up or not, send out an RFP to see what pricing you can get that's best for your community. At this time, I do want to let Jerry Harrison with Waste Pro come and just speak briefly about franchising, and then specifically one of the counties closest to us that has franchised within the last few years, which is Gwinnett County.
I'm gonna ask Bob to come with me because he deals with Gwinnett County every day. He is our municipal marketer, so he handles that all the time. I was a part of Gwinnett County when they first decided to go to franchise hauler zones, if you would, and they split it up amongst, I think it's 7 haulers now. I think it's what handles 5 haulers that handle Gwinnett County. I kind of established a pros and cons list for this thing. To us, a pro is, you go in one subdivision, you pick up every house. It's everyone is participating. You get where we go in, we have maps, we have a customer list. We'll go get 10 or 12. AAA comes in and gets 10 or 12. Curbside comes in and gets 10 or 12. Usually all 5 days, you got garbage trucks in your city or in your streets, and it's garbage and recycle trucks going up and down every street for every company. So it's for us. We think it's a better option. We do it at a lot of places all over the Southeast, especially in Florida. They have it a lot, and it works. It seems to work. It saves the city money. But I wanted to open. Anyone have any questions about it? Any concerns? Anything that you may have? Yes, sir.
Maybe Suki could answer this, but right now the private haulers are competing in each neighborhood. So the competition, theoretically drives down prices or keeps them reasonable. How would that work in a franchise situation?
There would be typically in a franchise situation like Gwinnett, when they send it out to bid, and they actually have one price for all the zones, and it's $17.91. Is that correct? I brought a cheat sheet just in case. $17.91 per month for basic service.
So it's managed by the bid process.
It's managed by the bid process, and it's managed by Gwinnett County. They have a billing office, and they bill for Waste Pro. So Waste Pro doesn't have to bill. Is that correct in Gwinnett?
that is.
They bill. The county bills for them and pays. So they have a constant stream, a constant base, and I don't think they allow for self-hauling in Gwinnett. So they did not. They chose to, and I did have the opportunities and consequences for up here as well, which we'll talk about. But that's just to kind of give you. And in Gwinnett, they have Advanced, Republic, Sanitation Solutions, Southern Sanitation, and Waste Pro are their 5 approved haulers in the 5 zones they created residentially only.
Yes.
Okay.
Mike?
Yeah, I kind of wouldn't have guessed that Waste Pro would be in favor of a franchise arrangement, but that, I'm being snarky, of course. But I will say this, it seemed based on the slides here that the better option is for us to do the collection ourselves. I mean, we'd be making $1.5 million that could go toward capital stuff based on what I saw on costs versus expenses, but if we stick with the system as now and we do a franchise or whatever, I mean, what's to say that we couldn't pass an ordinance that says, okay, if you're picking up garbage in this neighborhood, you can only pick up garbage on this certain day. I mean, can we not regulate how many instead of, and if trucks are going through a neighborhood 5 times a week, why can't we say, well, if you're in this franchise, you can go through these neighborhoods on
So 5
Monday.
trucks on one day?
5 trucks on one day.
No.
Well, I'm just saying, I mean,
Well, I can
if
tell
not,
you, no.
if not, then the option is to do it ourselves.
No, we do a zone and it's 1 truck a week with private haulers.
And I'll show you how we have.
The other,
some
may I?
maps.
The other thing to consider is if we take it over, we're gonna put, especially the smaller haulers, we're gonna put them out of business. Curbside is
I don't think-
Bogart.
I don't think-
Curbside is a Bogart, Georgia company. We'll put them out of
Andy?
business.
Well, I would say 2 things. One is if we go to single hauler franchising, the smaller people are going to get put out of business anyway, which is why I'm not in favor of doing that. But the second thing is that the last solid waste meeting that I attended, which was about 2 months ago, I think it's important to understand that for my colleagues that were not there, not all of the haulers are in favor of of going to single zone franchising. This particular hauler is, but not all of them are. So I think that's important to bear in mind when we start to discuss this.
Melissa?
I'd be interested in identifying neighborhoods where the urban services district could be expanded and annexed, like Riverbend or
Riverbend.
It was Riverbend last week. Yeah, I mean, just, taking because our urban core has expanded, since 25 years ago when all this was consolidated. I'd be interested in taking kind of an incremental approach where we say, hey, where are there some dense neighborhoods that are adjacent to our urban core, adjacent to our current district, where maybe we could buy 1 or 2 more trucks and expand that district, and then look into franchising for the rest of the county.
I would just want to add that in Gwinnett, what happened in Gwinnett is they built the zones so that it didn't just push out any smaller haulers. There are a couple zones that are catered just for those smaller haulers, although they're not big, but it's proportionate to what their
they're
customer
doing.
base was in the
And
beginning.
I do want to
so,
share
yeah.
to Commissioner Harris. This was put together, the 2 PowerPoints the slides coming up, was put together to protect those smaller haulers, to give them a piece of the pie, and proportionally, if you decided, the hardest part of this too is to decide about what did you call it, Commissioner Ditz? I can't remember, it wasn't self-hauling.
I called them unaccounted for customers is what I was.
Yeah, but the self-haulers are, the next 2 slides show you what it might look like in Athens if we made everybody have a hauler, how that proportionally could go up for our smaller haulers and for franchise hauling. Again, if you set it up like Gwinnett, the billing would come through us. They wouldn't have to chase down people and have that unknown number of customers, which could be attractive if you got all the haulers in the room and insured them that we're not trying to put out of business the smaller haulers. So I just want to put that caveat in there that some of the conversations in other communities have revolved around protecting some of the smaller haulers. They've been really adamant about protecting the smaller haulers.
Now that Melissa has stated her desire to chip away at it, as a suburban person, I'll tell you, let's not chip away at it. Let's solve the problem for the county. I would suggest that we go even further and require the residents in the whole county to have hauling services and require that they have recycling. These are the right things to do. I can tell you that at the mall, the amount of contamination, because those those recycling bins are there, is tremendous. And it's because people are throwing their garbage in there. I've seen it happen, and I've talked to them about it. And you know what they told me, don't you? Huh?
Even on College Avenue.
Yeah, so, we have the problem, we need to solve more problems than just taking some trucks off the street. We need to improve our trash collection, decrease our litter, decrease our recycling contamination, and clean up our streets. And it has to be comprehensive, in my opinion.
Tim?
And I want to, you just kind of stopped, but this is the why. And Commissioner Neesmith, before, I just wanted to make sure you guys knew the whys of why you're even looking at this. This is why other communities do it. It does reduce street traffic, noise, air pollution. It usually improves collection services. When you have that franchise, some of the issues we've had, we don't have franchise hauling. We really didn't have a whole lot of teeth to help our general service district lately with some of the issues they've been experiencing. It boosts recycling. There's statistics to prove that when you have franchise hauling, it does boost recycling and rates, creates more transparent pricing, because Commissioner Neesmith and I could live next to each other and pay very different rates to private haulers, and do often. You might get in on a lower rate, a special rate, and I have been the customer for 10 years. I could be paying a lot more than that newer customer, and because they do that, it's common that they do that. Improves safety, reduces litter and illegal dumping. In the last year and a half, we have seen a tremendous amount of illegal dumping and litter. And our drop-off site, in particular the mall, is being hit by illegal contamination a tremendous amount. It gains efficiencies for haulers, which they spoke to. It typically improves customer service because you talk to one person, and typically it's a municipality because you're talking to. You're not talking to. Some of them set it up where you have to call the private hauler. Some set it up to where you're going into a municipal call center, and then they say, hey, hauler XYZ, they've had this complaint about you. And one of the biggest things, too, that staff wanted you to know is consistent communication. Right now, we have communication coming from, 5 different haulers in the residential sector, so people get confused a lot. So we have to straighten them out on that communication a lot. And then the why nots, though. It's not a free market, like you guys said. It does end competition like we have it now. And I'm going to take the second bullet. Although you guys might not think it's much, some of you are new commissioners. Commissioner Herod knows residents have relationships with their current haulers. And they will come out and tell you they have strong relationships with their current haulers. And the last bullet is also equally as important and impactful. You will get calls. It works best when self-hauling is eliminated. And just the number right here, there's some discrepancies, or are some discrepancies. The number of self-haulers based on reports from private haulers seems to be substantial compared to GIS. A GIS reports 17,089 single-family homes in the general service district. Private haulers are servicing only 11,381 per the last self-reporting cycle. That leaves a difference of 5,700 potential self-haulers in the general service district. So that's where some of that contamination is coming from. We are confident. Yes, Commissioner, sorry.
Well, I was just going to agree with some of what Jerry just said. I don't think we need to chip away at this, especially because if we quote-unquote chip away at the areas closest to the urban services district, those are the more densely populated areas, those are the more profitable areas. So then you're left with, well, what happens in the rest of the county where population is not as dense. So I agree with what Commissioner Neesmith said, that we need to look at this holistically. We do need to try and figure out a way to reduce the amount of trash that we see being dumped on our streets. Some of that's falling out of garbage trucks. Suki knows 2 or 3 years ago, I called you. I was behind a garbage truck on Research Drive, and there was all sorts of crap coming out of the back of it, and I had to swerve to avoid it, and I called you. I was hot to trot on that issue.
You were, and that hauler had to come back and pick up.
That's exactly right.
Yep, we got that hauler to come back and pick up, and then Mayor Gertz and Manager Blaine Williams, they called me. They had similar issue with trash flying out of the bottom.
I just call the police.
And you can.
But one of the other things on your why not, you are giving people no choice. Once you go to the single hauler per zone, they have no choice. And if they have bad service, they are SOL. They have no choice, they have no option to change. And the thing about the relationships with their current private haulers, I know that your example here is simply an example, but if you have a current relationship with a private hauler, and if the zones were to be set out in the manner that you have on your diagram here, and I recognize it's just an example,
Yeah, and I put
just
that
an
in big
example,
letters, yes, just an
but
example.
just for the sake of argument,
Yep, yep,
if we
yep.
went to something like this, you have lots of people who are going to have to change the trash hauler that they have been possibly using for 20 or 30 years, okay? So, again, I can't say this enough. If you want a whole bunch of people coming out to town, to City Hall, this is going to bring them out, so you better be careful what you wish for, because sometimes you get it.
I'm gonna let Jerry, and do you have any questions about hauling going, or franchise hauling specifically in Gwinnett? Like, they have done franchise,
I did.
true?
I had a,
Okay,
yeah.
great, okay.
I did have a question specifically on that, and like how I guess that works in Gwinnett, or if there's other examples. So in Gwinnett, the billing is done through the municipal.
Yes, through the county.
Through the county. Is customer service then done through the county?
A portion of it is. It's usually escalated to the county. So if there's issues that they can't handle with the hauler, then it gets escalated.
I would just imagine, a lot of times if you're having a problem, you pull out your bill, you call the number on the bill if there's a problem. So I would imagine that the county probably gets a lot of telephone calls for people, maybe missed pickups, that kind of stuff. I could see that being a bit of a burden on our staff if we had that in place. And then, yeah, I guess the piggybacking on what Commissioner Harrod was bringing up is kind of the other thing I was concerned about here is, when there are issues and you're not able to move off of, as we just had with Republic, which is one of the things that kind of spurred this on. Over on the west side especially, me and Commissioner Neesmith had many customers in which if they were not able to move off of Republic, they'd be very irate. And so
East
I'm
side
curious
too.
of what.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
East side, it's everywhere.
Yeah, I know, yeah. So I wonder what the situation there is then. Has that happened in Gwinnett where we've had the capacity for one of these haulers who has a zone fall and?
No, not necessarily in Gwinnett, but what we have seen throughout the Southeast with these type of franchises that typically your contract has a mechanism that gives remedy. Could be a breach of contract, could be a series of fines that come against the company that has the problem. So there's relief under the contract. So widespread problems, service issues, that leads down a path that eventually ends up with a replacement of that hauler. So.
Okay. Right. And I know that.
And one thing that helps eliminate that is, again, like I said, you pull in a neighborhood, you pick up every house.
Sure.
You don't, where you have issues now with some of these is, they have a route sheet and they got 30 homes in that neighborhood and that's the only 30 they have. And go back to some of the issues that we have, we all have missed stops. And, most of them, and I'm going to say in my area here, because I manage this Athens-Clarke County myself, most of them I have is, like we were talking about, they have a 35-gallon can and they have 2 bags beside it. We take the can, not the bags. We don't have the sticker program. So then we go and then they throw them 2 bags in and call us. Hey, you missed my trash. So we have to swing back. So now we just take it. We have to take it because there's not an option, or we have to go back and get it, one or the other, because it becomes you missed me, he said, she said type.
And
The other thing, when you go in a neighborhood, you pick up every house. So generally, if you ever have a miss, in that case, it wasn't out.
Right.
Driver don't just go down through there and miss one house.
Right.
He picks up everything. So it's, I think it eliminates a lot of your service issues.
Yeah.
And it shores up your recycling.
And I think theoretically too, when you think about if we have a franchise zone and a hauler is having trouble and the first place they call is the county's going to know we got a problem.
Yeah.
And they don't have to wait for the commissioner to report them.
What you're having,
and they can then take them down that path.
Yes, sir.
For remediation.
And what you're having right now is you'll see that it's some of the routes here aren't being ran for a couple weeks.
Yes.
And that's usually when you hear about it. they're just not picking them, they're not running for, I mean, we hear it every day.
Yes.
So they're just not going there for 2 to 3 weeks at a time.
That's right.
And that's usually where you have those issues.
And Suki, I wonder if because of this, and I definitely hear you that like in Gwinnett and these other places, the contracts are there. There are remedies written into those contracts, strong policy in place to keep things running smoothly. And I know that Suki, we've talked about that. We don't have those strong policies in place here. We don't have those built-in remedies. So even if we weren't to go one of these directions, we would have to do some policy changes. Because what I see it happen possibly is that if a company like Republic or some other company was having some capacity issues, employment issues, if they were having those issues in Gwinnett County, they likely might pull off some of their staff from Athens-Clarke County and send them over to Gwinnett because they have
That's what's happening
serious.
right now. And
Right.
I'm glad you brought that up because Corey just told me to remind you guys, these issues aren't happening where they have contractual issues, whether it's financial issues that they're going to have or potentially get kicked out of that franchise. They're going to protect those franchises first. Then they're going to actually help Athens as best they can because, again, we don't have a franchise with these haulers. It's only a permit. And we don't have a lot of teeth in our franchise. I will say behind the scenes, I am working with the attorney's office, and we are looking at thresholds for complaints because of what's been going on. And so we are hoping to create a policy in the next couple months that will demonstrate if a hauler has so many complaints. When I say complaints, though, they have to be logged complaints at the solid waste department. Then they would have consequences at each different threshold. Ultimately, the last threshold would be going in front of the administrative hearing officer, which is municipal court judge. And so that's what we're trying to look at is if you guys want to keep the same organization we have now, I think it's in all fairness to our citizens, we've got to have something in place that can remedy what's been going on in Athens. But it's a band, it's kind of like, it's helping you guys, and it makes our citizens feel a little bit better if we're logging those complaints and have thresholds that something really can happen to private haulers that aren't giving good customer service. So we are working on that
By
behind
the way,
the
this
scenes.
is happening in Oconee County too.
Oh, it's happening in Monroe. Coney County doesn't have, they're not franchised, are they? No, they're not franchised.
just getting bad
The only place
service.
that I think that Republic was, and I don't like, they are having some issues in Monroe as well, but I think they're franchised there.
No, they're not.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, I live in Monroe, actually, and it's happening there.
Y'all want us to move toward a decision point, but I know.
And can I show you these last two? Can I show?
Certainly, but a
Oh,
couple
gotcha,
commissioners
sorry.
have questions. Go ahead, Mike.
So what I'm hearing is, if we go to a franchise route, that the county will take care of the billing for them, the county will take care of the customer calls for them, the county will then have to develop policies to make sure that Republic or whoever else doesn't mistreat the customers. The county's basically doing everything
County's going to fix the rate.
except picking up the garbage.
And making the money.
So if we're going to go in that direction, we just might as well have the county look at the total package. It's kind of simple to me.
Andy?
Or not, or keep it the way it is, one or the other.
Commissioner Hamby stole my thunder. I mean, yeah, if the county's going to do everything that he just mentioned, then that's an argument for just extending solid waste across the entire county, in which case there will be no private haulers. So, but I think Commissioner Denson raises a really important point, which is that the biggest issue we seem to have with the way that things work at the moment is that we have no teeth in punishing people that are not doing what they have a contractual obligation to do with their customers. And, you know, we've been talking about one hauler tonight. 2 or 3 years ago, we would have been talking about a different hauler. So they go in cycles. But I think that before we start going too far down this rabbit hole and getting a whole bunch of people stirred up, I think the first thing we need to do is to look at putting some teeth in our ordinance so that we can seriously punish these trash haulers who are not fulfilling their obligations with their customers.
Jerry?
Well, you're right. In terms of if we had the franchise zones, then the county would have quite a bit of a burden in administrating this. But there's franchise fees.
Well, and to speak to that, Gwinnett County, not to bring them up, just because they're closest, they do charge $17.91, but a percentage of that stays with the county for billing office and customer service.
and I
So
think
it's
it's
not
just
like
fair,
they kept
'cause
the
they don't
same
have to do
billing
that
and customer
anymore.
service.
They don't
So-
have that cost.
Right.
We do. We should
So there was a
recover it.
percentage.
Yes.
It was like it broke down to like I think they said it was like
And if you want to
$1.50.
get teeth into our permitted haulers, which would become franchise haulers, there's no better teeth than us knowing what the complaints are real time, how many there are, and having the power to end that franchise and award it to a different hauler. I mean, that's teeth.
Suki, I know you have a couple more slides.
Yeah, thank you guys.
That's good.
Thanks.
By the way, you guys are doing a great job.
This example, truly were examples. I put it in caps because I don't want anybody, this is like putting a dot on the map where you want to locate a landfill, right? Oh, Brad left. Or there's Brad. You don't put dots on places you want landfills. These were just examples. What GIS did in this model was took current service, that's current customer numbers, and made a zone out of them, meaning our customers roughly, although he has a little bit extra, GIS had a different number than even we did as residential units. So they had ACC Solid Waste servicing about 10,000 customers. They kept us in the urban core with that same number. That was a no-brainer. But all the other haulers that we currently have are color-coded in different sectors or zones so that we wouldn't have haulers in and out of all these areas all the time. So this is just one, if you really didn't want to change much else and not make self-haulers have a hauler, it could look something like this, and this is protecting all of them and showing. The next slide was making all customers have a hauler, and GIS did this based on densities, and tried to color code and give the correct percentage to each current hauler.
Our slide's blank.
Yeah, ours is
Oh, sorry about that. Okay. Well, I can send this to you guys. Sorry that was blank. This should have been on there, this GIS map. So this GIS map shows you, and I'll send it to you separately. This demonstrates one example of how you could keep the current haulers, add to their hauler base by making everybody have a private hauler, and then have a zone so that you limit haulers in the areas to one hauler or two trucks in that area at 1 day a week.
Is that showing ACC expanding? What's the dark purple? Or
It's showing the dark purple. It looks like it's Athens-Clarke County. What this slide demonstrated is keeping all the same haulers and giving them the correct percentage based on their current customer count. What GIS did. This was a little harder to do, but I asked him if we made everybody have a hauler, and then to equally distribute those 5,000 and some odd households that we're saying are currently self-hauling, distributed it percentage-wise on the current customer base. This could be just one example of what it might look like. Again, please, these are just examples based on GIS data.
Currently we have ACC Solid Waste has 9,600
correct
customers correctly. All right, so that jumps this up to 14,000. I mean, it's a 5,000 customer jump right there.
We'd be requiring hauling,
Right.
correct?
I get that. But I thought we only had 5,000 customers who were self-hauling.
Right, well, that's what our numbers are. GIS had a little bit different. So this is where the number discrepancies. We've got lots of number discrepancies that we were going to have to, however this ends tonight, I'm going to have to get water business, GIS, all of us together. Okay. We've got, the only numbers we know for sure are the 9,600 that we actually bill for. We can tell you for sure those are our customers. The rest of them, we get self-reporting from the private haulers. It's not matching up with the residential base.
So it looks like it's very far off.
It looks like it's off. So
really
this is GIS. When GIS took residential units, this is what our GIS office is reporting as the amount of people that need serviced by a private hauler in a single-family home.
Okay. And so this essentially theorizes that every existing hauler gets approximately a 50% bump in customer base.
A percent, yes.
Yeah. So, is this the last slide, Suki?
Just telling you, I just want to make sure, and Commissioner Herod knows this, I just want to make sure you guys know that this isn't an easy decision for, it ends up being hard for my staff, but we will do whatever's asked of us, but it's also hard for your customer base. I'm just gonna let you know, customers are very attached to their haulers or they're attached to self-hauling. And so it's a very emotional response that you will get from changing this up, and not to say that all of it, I want what's best for the community, and we here at staff, we report to you, we will do whatever's asked. I just don't want anybody blindsided by the conversations that we're having here tonight. You might even hear as early as tomorrow, because people are watching at home and already upset that we're even talking about, changing waste services in Athens. So that's the summary. I just want to make sure you understand. Also, we intend on asking some questions that we talked about tonight at our citizen input meetings. And so we're fully prepared. We have our our consultant, Abby Goldsmith, will be the person leading discussion. We didn't want staff to be that person. We've already learned our lessons in the past, having staff leading that discussion. So she'll be leading that discussion and asking questions about self-hauling, private hauling, expanding the ACC solid waste service into the general service, but then we also have questions about composting, bulky waste pickup. We have some other things that we would like to discuss that we currently don't offer in Athens that we would like to get feedback on. So I do have community input session posters if you want to make sure to encourage folks. So we have those input sessions this week and next week. We have a collection survey that's out there till September 6th. And we'd love to get feedback about these issues on there. And then the last thing is, whatever we do, in October, we're going to come to you to talk about the funding mechanism for recycling and education. We found out we can't do what we proposed early this spring, and so we'll be coming with some other options because recycling processing has been very expensive lately, and that's it.
All right, y'all. So obviously we've got some public input that's underway,
Right.
kind of in a broad way, given these meetings. But, what I'd like to do, just to wrap, is go around the room and hear two things from everyone. First, do you have any broad thoughts? And is there anything that you would want included in either some additional research or in what the composition of a zone franchise arrangement could look like? So, Patrick, is anything?
You skip me? Skip over.
Skip. All right.
I would like to see us somehow, if, people are attached to their self-hauling, or we could require everybody to be hauled. Maybe we could do something like an in-between thing where you have a self-hauling permit and you're given a certain number of bags per year, and somehow we could that would give us some means of keeping track of who was self-hauling and whether or not those bags made it to a landfill or one of our drop-off facilities.
I think the main information I'd like to know is the recycling customers, just those percentage of those numbers. I guess, I'm looking at this as like three big issues. There's the quality of service issue, which is a few different ways that we could do that, including just putting some teeth in our policy. There's the self-hauling issue, which at least in some circumstances is much more than we'd like to see, that is equating to trash burning and dumping. And also people not recycling, I think, enough. And then the third one being the number of trucks on these people's roads in neighborhoods like mine and other suburban neighborhoods here, leaving trash, damage to the roads, pollution because of having so many diesel running trucks going through. And I have to agree. I feel like the best solution to those three things is going to be just to go ahead and expand the entire county to the best trash hauler, I think, that services Athens-Clarke County, which is ACC Solid Waste. I understand that the issue of doing that and how people are very connected to their current haulers, but we run into that problem if we do the franchising. Yeah.
Well, we somewhat agree. I don't want to put the haulers out of business, not a one of them. I don't want them to lose a single job. I believe that we do need to have a comprehensive solution that includes the requirement to have a hauler, the requirement to have to include recycling, and that we divide the county up among the haulers and we require those things. I think as far as citizens' relationship with their hauler, I get that. I've never had a bad hauler. But I'm not married to them either. And Clarke County does do a good job, but I think we need to let the entrepreneurs survive.
Andy?
I am not interested in taking people's choice away from them. Currently, they have choice out in the general service district, and I do not want to deny people that choice. I think that we need to, the way to start is to have some real teeth in our ordinance. And if you are providing a poor service and you are not picking up trash because you are taking your trash trucks away from Athens-Clarke County to service Gwinnett County, then I think there should be a penalty that comes with that. So I would like to maintain the current system that we have at the moment with some tweaks, but I'm not interested in removing people's freedom of choice. And I would like to see a more punitive approach taken towards those haulers who are not doing what they've been contracted to do.
Mike?
If we've got some community input meetings scheduled, perhaps we ought to listen to those before we decide, or before we give direction to Suki about what needs to be done or shouldn't be done. That's all I got to say.
Suki, do we have some data from other communities that have made a transition that might be helpful? Things like knowing, when Gwinnett County went to a zone franchise arrangement, was there less of a problem with trashed streets? I mean, obviously, that's one of the things that we've seen a lot with litter.
Anything else specifically? Because I'm sure they have.
Well, contamination of recycling.
Recycling, contamination, okay.
It'd be great to look at those case studies of what transitions have yielded.
Let me look and see, yep,
And increased recycling. Was there increased recycling?
okay.
Patrick, anything else?
Nope, just want to say I'd like to look at the option of going into franchising. I just know during my campaign, I knocked on a lot of doors, even the people who didn't understand it. When I explained it to them, a lot of people were in favor for, neighborhood by neighborhood, were in favor for franchise hauling. They think it's a great idea. But I do respect Commissioner Harrod's idea. I do like the fact that we do need to look into putting teeth and to make sure that the bad haulers are making sure that our bad haulers are doing what they're contracted to do. But I think we should look toward other communities that have successfully done it. And I think the people of Athens will love the idea of a franchise trash pickup. At the end of the day, it's just trash.
It
End of the day.
All right, end of the day, it's just trash. And end of the presentation. Thank you, Suki.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
everybody who came.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Do folks need to take a quick break before we talk about General Assembly? All right, everybody. For those of you who've been here in the past, we've often had our conversation with members of our local delegation to the General Assembly very close to the end of the year. And then again, a follow-up after the General Assembly sessions, 40 days ends, so typically April or May. What we're going to do this year is have an earlier conversation ahead of the start of the General Assembly session, because I think it's been observed that a lot of the planning happens in those autumn months as committee conversations are getting underway, as there are study groups that are gathering in Atlanta. And so I think by having a conversation with our General Assembly members in September, that'll mean that if any jockeying or any language development or things have to happen, that can be ready prior to the start of the session in January, which I think will benefit advancing any of those items of local interest. We've got a set of items here that we'll run down. Conceptually, one of the things.
Do we have that list?
It's part of the packet.
Oh, all right. Sorry.
That was
It's online, too.
That was online. Conceptually, what seems to work the best as we hand off items to General Assembly members is for there to be some definition around an item. So rather than sort of thematically saying, we want, environmental benefit, to kind of define exactly what that benefit is and how that might operate. And even if there's some language that we can hand to them, I think we get further down the road. So tonight, I think would be beneficial is one, as we go down these items, are folks interested in them, item by item? And what we've done in the past is sometimes strike things where there just wasn't unanimity of interest. And then secondly, is there some finessing or advancing of the language around any of these items that would make it a more powerful ask of our General Assembly members? So those are the two things. So before we get started, any questions? Jerry?
I certainly like the three that you've included. And Patrick, I want to let you understand that there already is oversight of EMS services by the state.
So let's actually go down the items.
Yeah.
Just so that everybody kind of understands, and if the item author or interested party kind of wants to make a couple of comments, that may give us some flesh. And so I just submitted three, kind of starting at the top of the list. I'd asked that nonpartisan unified government elections could be moved to the general election date, November date, by local preference. So if Columbus does or doesn't want to do that, that would be their choice. If Augusta does or doesn't, that would be their choice. Macon, Chattahoochee County, the other unified governments in the state. So interest in that item?
Yeah, huge.
All right, and obviously, that just means that there's more voter participation in local elections. All right, so moving on, obviously I worked for school districts for quite some time and have observed the dynamics in the school district kind of comparative to this body. And the school district obviously deals with a budget that's comparably sized and certainly consumes more local ad valorem taxes. And so my interest is... That's right, property taxes. And so my interest is in having school board members compensated similarly to county commissioners. The state does set minimum thresholds of pay for many offices, sheriffs, district attorneys, and the like. And so what I've asked is that $15,000 be a floor for compensation for school board members in the state. Just kind of looking at all the possibilities. A local school board could make that decision on their own. So this doesn't have to route through the state, but I think it may be of some utility. Yeah, Tim?
I totally think this is needed. But I do wonder, since the Clarke County School Board has a meeting just as we're going into with their state legislators, are they presenting this also as a...
I have noted that I'm bringing this forward to a couple of school board members. They were favorable to it. I mean, just of the maybe three that I've shared it with. But I think it'd be worth checking in with them.
I think it's a good proposal. I'm just thinking of the counter argument, which would be that I could imagine if this were to come through the General Assembly, that in some communities with not very many people living in them, that the argument might be made that this would be a burden.
Right, a Tolliver County that has 300 students in their whole public school district.
So I don't know if we have a counter argument, but I mean, I'm in favor of putting this on here, but
Should we at least bring this forward?
I think it's always good to anticipate what the response might
Let
be.
them wrestle with it.
Okay.
Yeah, they could always lower the number if they felt like it was.
Come up with
a
a
formula.
tier based on population.
Population or something else, yeah. And in fact, that is how, I think it's sheriffs are compensated, or maybe tax commissioners. The last of the three that I brought forward is explicit authority for concurrent state and local jurisdiction to provide penalties for possession of under 1 ounce of marijuana. This would just make absolutely clear in state code, what has begun to happen in an ad hoc way around the state with varying interpretations of what may or may not be viable based on differential legal opinion. And this is comparable to the way that some other codes, such as disorderly conduct, works, where OCGA is pointed in its ability for local governments to have some authority.
And this exact thing was done for underage drinking, correct? And was kind of.
Yeah, so, in underage drinking, what was actually done with underage drinking is that statewide, no locality can arrest for minor in possession. It has to be a citation unless there's a concurrent charge, like disorderly conduct or something else. But I would argue that the arguments that went along with that minor in possession modification are also valid here, e.g., that 19-year-old shouldn't be forever affected in his or her livelihood because of a relatively minor offense, and so the same would be true here if this were an option statewide. All right. Commissioner Davenport, do you want to talk a little bit about any additional EMS oversight that you would seek?
Could you skip over me again?
Sure, absolutely. We'll come back to you. Moving on to Commissioner Link. You mentioned local control of affordable housing-related items, including inclusionary zoning, impact fees, opportunity zones, and property tax exemptions.
Yeah, I bring this up every year. Other states do have more local control of these things. As far as opportunity zones go, those are governed by the state. I mean, if we could have the opportunity to create kind of local opportunity zones that we could use as investment or, kind of carrots to wag to get affordable housing investment.
Maybe the word local should be put there.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
way we're not trying to take it all.
Yeah. But, and there's plenty of research and stuff. I haven't had time to gather it, but I'd be happy to pull some examples from other states that do allow stuff like this.
Yes, certainly, if you look at Massachusetts, even North Carolina, some of those communities have the ability to say, we want some affordability mix in any new development, or a payment in lieu. That's not uncommon.
And then there's the speeding thing. We bring that up every year, too. I'd like to see the state give us more control over speed zones, especially in our neighborhoods where we could lower speed limits without having those weird, you can only lower the speed limit if people are already going a lower speed. That's ridiculous. And the school zone thing, we've come to realize that school zones only apply if a school actually exits onto a street where so it doesn't take pedestrians into account. We're seeing this thing on Evans Street. They can't put a school zone there because the parking lot actually exits onto, Deering Street or something? I think it's Deering.
Yeah, Deering and Waddell.
Yeah, and Chase Street.
Even though buses pick up
The school
along
zone
Evans.
that's currently, that's on Nakuchi is actually no longer legal. The sign is still up from when it used to exit onto Nakuchi. But, these are streets where tons and tons of kids are walking. So I'd like to see that those school zone requirements be tweaked. And just allow local municipalities more control over the speed limits we set in our neighborhoods. I mean, I personally would like to see us set 15-mile-per-hour speed limits in some of our neighborhood streets. I don't know if we're even allowed to do that by the state of Georgia. And then there's increased transit funding. I know there is a proposal out there to do that. I'd like to, have us explicitly express support for any increased transit funding we can get.
Yeah.
You might know more about it.
I will speak on that, in which I'm also in support of the one at the bottom here that was put in front of by Transit Director McDuffie. But of course, that one is done, again, through a T-SPLOS mechanism, a local sales tax, putting the burden on the county, creating revenue. And what we need to have, in addition to that, is some state-funded revenue for operations for transit. So, yeah.
And I'd like to ask the question, is it legal for us to add a motor vehicle registration fee, a local motor vehicle registration fee? I mean, maybe that's something we could add to this, allow local counties to add some kind of motor vehicle registration fee that could be funneled into transit funding. I know that it's done in other states.
I know that can't be done currently. I ran that through the tax commissioner and Butch McDuffie at one point. There is, I think, as Butch mentions kind of at the end of the document, this bill that Kevin Tanner, who's chair of the Transportation Committee in the House, is moving ahead with, that's still alive right now. And that could be something that could be a basis for some additional operating funds for transit. And so I think it would probably be best to try and say, okay, what's going on in the House right now around transit, and how might we build upon that? So we may ask that 511, include some operating funds. Would that be a reasonable specific ask?
Some means where local municipalities can collect some revenue that has a twofold effect of increasing transit funding and also possibly discouraging motor vehicle usage.
Yeah, I would like if it could be on motor vehicle, just so it wasn't another regressive tax that was placed.
Yeah, and I mean, personally, I'd like to see it tiered where the more vehicles per household, the higher the registration fee gets, to encourage people reducing the number of cars in their household, which encourages transit. And then there was a proposal this past year for a cost of living wage increase for UGA employees rather than that percentage rate. So it would allow the lower paid employees to get a larger raise. 10% of somebody making $24,000 is peanuts, but if you put a $1,500 raise across the board, it's kind of a more equitable way of a raise. And I feel like we really need to advocate for UGA employees because they make up so much of our constituency, and that money gets spent here in Athens-Clarke County. So, for more tax dollars. Reestablishing the income cap on
Melissa,
HOPE. I bring this up every year.
Melissa, there's a couple of ways to skin that cat with the UGA employees. One of them, of course, is to raise their minimum pay.
Wage floor.
Yeah.
Raise the floor, which might be a more effective way to do it. I don't know.
It might be, yeah.
Maybe we could word that in such a way that we're talking about raising the floor.
Yeah, well, yeah, or just increasing wages for lower pay, especially for lower paid employees.
Yeah,
there's a big gap. There's a
yeah, I don't think a wage, not a cost of living wage, but a raising.
Just,
raising
a
floor.
significant increase for the lowest
Yeah, I mean,
paid employees.
I support that, and I agree with the rationale. They're going to say, "Oh, you crazy? That's none of your business," but
Yeah.
it is.
I mean, typically they're doing these across the board raises that have
Well,
less.
they did raise the floor a few years ago.
Yeah,
Well,
but that's been a while.
Several years ago.
Currently it's a percentage, and therefore, so you have somebody who's making $200,000 is getting a considerable raise, while somebody who's working in dining services is getting a few $100s. And so, and I can find exactly the resolution number, but there is a resolution in the House and the Senate that was dropped last year that's still alive that I think Representative Fry is a co-sponsor of. So we could include that, just asking for support. If nothing else, just the supporters of that has been asking for a hearing, if nothing else. So at least a hearing so that these kind of things can be at least discussed in the state capitol. So.
And then I brought this up before and haven't gotten much support, but reestablishing the income cap on the HOPE scholarship. Right now, your average UGA student is coming from a family in the top 20% income bracket. In fact, I think it's actually increased in recent years. You know, it's really homogenized the student body. I mean, I know it's not all of them, but you know, I feel like that money could be diverted towards helping those lower income students achieve that B average and qualify for HOPE. I feel like, you know, they've pulled money from those pre-K programs when the revenues were lower. And I think instead of doing that, the whole program was imagined with an income cap. Zell Miller imagined it with an income cap. And it was lowered after a year, and then it was completely thrown out the window. So it's basically become an entitlement program for wealthier kids who are most likely to achieve those higher grades.
Melissa, can I suggest that you end the sentence by saying reestablishing the income cap on the Hope Scholarship?
Just, okay.
Because I think that might get.
Well, I mean, I just want to
understand
make
what
sure
you're
that
saying.
money's going towards assisting those lower income students who are struggling to achieve because of all the challenges of poverty that keep them from achieving. So those investments are made into that community, so those kids have a better chance of achieving that B average and getting that scholarship.
All right.
I mean, I think that's you know, I want to make sure that you know, if there are any savings, that it goes towards those particular students. This next one is kind of in response to the abortion restrictions that they passed last year, you know, making it pretty much impossible to terminate a pregnancy in the state of Georgia when we have the highest maternal mortality rate and high infant death rates, really high child abuse rates, closing rural hospitals, you know, all these issues. And I want to know how our state representatives plan to alleviate these issues where they're just, you know, where they've passed a law that it's only going to make them worse. You know, I'd really like them to present to us what their plans are for health care, and particularly maternal and child health care in the state of Georgia.
Can you turn the question into a statement, a request?
Can I turn,
address the dismal mortality rate, infant death, child care rates, other than asking what's being done?
There's a question mark in there. You want me to turn it into
A statement.
a statement?
A request.
Okay.
Address it.
And obviously, this is a big topic of conversation statewide.
National.
I mean,
Yeah.
in policy circles, I think
Yeah.
across the spectrum right now. I mean, I've even heard, I think a week ago from a lobbyist that the new conversation about new gambling operations is being posited as a healthcare fix rather than a pre-K fix or something else, as has been attempted in the past. I mean, certainly, I mean, I think, you know, the kind of strong point that you raise is that, you know, we are the healthcare hub for the entire region, and we know that there's a lot of uncompensated care, north of $70 million a year of uncompensated care between our two hospitals. And so if there's better care broadly, then we're going to have a stronger system. So maybe
reword it.
could we boil that down into sort of stronger foundation of care, particularly for those vulnerable populations?
I'll work on it.
Okay.
And then this next one is you know, definitely in response to the mass shooting epidemic and the fact that our Republican legislators repeatedly loosen gun control. I want to know if they have anything in mind to how we're going to prevent these kind of mass shootings in our own community.
Again, I think we need to make it a request to do something. These guys aren't. I don't think. I'd be surprised. I'd love for them to, but maybe if somebody else does, and they go, oh yeah, this is what they asked for.
So ask for
Action.
background checks?
No, I
specific
wouldn't.
things?
Well, maybe so.
I'd
Local
certainly go with
control?
the universal background
Universal
check
background checks. That's something
Can
palatable.
we get rid of
It's
assault
something-
weapons?
It's something most people want.
Athens-Clarke County ban assault weapons?
Yeah, I mean, you know, when you look at these questions, they're best dealt with in the broadest frame possible because of the easy mobility of those things, right? So even Chicago, that's part of Illinois with pretty strong laws, or California with pretty strong laws, where there was the shooting at the Garlic Festival a few weeks ago, you know, suffered from being adjacent to Nevada, a state with weak laws. So I would so wish that what we did in our borders would have this significant impact on violence and use of firearms here, but I just know it's not the case.
Yeah. What about open carry? They allow, I mean, that's something that if you're in Athens-Clarke County and open carrying, it's obvious.
Well, open carry is pretty well, was permitted all over Georgia.
I know, but could we get local control of open
You have
carry?
to have a concealed weapons permit to open carry.
No, you don't.
That was the whole point of open carry.
No, you don't.
Compared to closed carry.
Yeah. I mean, my fear is, I mean, we saw this happen, you know, people can tote their guns around and you don't know if they're a shooter or if they're just, practicing open carry for kicks and giggles.
And something else that I know, again, like Representative Fry has advocated for at times, I've heard him say, is, to get a hunting license, you have to go through training to be able to get a hunting rifle. But to be able to get a handgun, you don't have to take any training
Well, to
at
get a
all.
driver's license, you
Yeah,
need to go
but so
through.
like, just to make that consistent, we've also.
So maybe we could ask for
all-
training.
Training for all weapon permits, yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe to boil this down to some things that are kind of unanimous of identified interest, would we want to ask for training protocol and universal background checks?
Maybe insurance requirements like they're doing in San Jose?
You could always ask for reconsideration of
You're right.
campus carry too.
Yeah.
You're right.
Georgia is not a traditional open carry state, however, open carry is legal with a Georgia permit.
Anybody else on the gun question? Things that,
So let me correct myself. Georgia does not allow open carry unless you have a permit, except in your house or your car.
thanks, Chair. All right. Commissioner Wright noted on top of the second page, explicit opportunity for septic tank inspections and regulations by localities. And I think Commissioner Hare mentioned that one too. Andy, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Just that, I didn't realize that Commissioner Wright had mentioned that, but I would agree, if we could get something that would allow us to have some greater local ability at the local level to regulate septic tanks, because they are a major contributor of fecal coliform potentially into our drinking water and groundwater and that kind of stuff. So.
And so this could entail ultimately things like mandatory inspection on some
Correct.
kind of regular clip and the requirement of pumping.
Correct.
When required. Okay.
That's what I was thinking.
I agree.
Everybody good with that? All right. Perfect. Tim, you had a couple?
Yeah, so the first one I had was on something we have talked about here, homestead exemption for low-income homeowners. This is something that's in government operations still, and I'm hoping that we'll bring that back up. I just wanted to talk about it here since this is something that's going to require our local legislators to carry it forward for us to be able to create it. And I do think that this year is the best year for us to try to talk to them, get them to actually work on this. Because if this passes, the way I understand this, it would have to go to a referendum. And I'd like, and next year being an election year, would have, a ballot coming out in November, so it could be affixed to that ballot. What I'm proposing from the research I've done from other communities, I've done this in other places, including some here in Georgia, would be to have an exemption put in place for those making at or below 150% of the poverty level, the federal poverty level for a family of three, that then they would have their property taxes frozen at a base year assessed value. There's a number of counties, including Oconee County, that has this kind of exemption put in place, except the one in Oconee County is also affixed with an age requirement. So it'd basically be the same thing, just without the age requirement there.
Everybody good for that?
So let me understand, there's a state regulation that prevents us from doing this?
It just has to be approved by the state
Oh,
for
I
us to
see.
move forward.
For us to move forward.
Right.
And Oconee did that.
Yep, they did. And at this point, there's actually almost, at least partially, like boilerplate language that they use whenever these things come up. And a number of counties have done this.
Very good.
And so I kind of researched that. And so that the way to do this is kind of set forward, yeah.
I see.
And the next one I had was Medicaid expansion. Of course, this was something that Governor Kemp was looking into with a proposed Medicaid waiver program that now looks very unlikely to pass since Utah asked for a very similar kind of waiver and was turned down. It's now very likely that we're going to be turned down, but there is still a path forward.
Or they were at least told that the federal component of that compensation would be much lower than the 90% offered through full expansion.
Right, exactly. They were asking for the 90% even though they wouldn't be covering as many people, and we're told no. So I think the best way to move forward is for us to move forward with what is already approved, getting that 90% by doing full Medicaid expansion. So I think it's a pretty easy ask and something they should be familiar with, and also I think familiar with what the present situation is. They're running out of options here, and the best option is still sitting on the table.
Medicaid expansion.
Yep.
Everybody?
And then the last one I had was asking for legislation be passed allowing for community choice aggregations to be created in Georgia.
If you haven't read that attachment, you should read it. It's really neat.
It is pretty neat. This has now been done in, I believe, 7 states. And what it really allows us to do is, I mean, of course, we just adopted this resolution for us to go to 100% renewable energy. And for us to really be able to do that, especially without having a large percentage of those be us buying credits, would be to go towards this CCA, which would basically allow the county to pool all of our electricity customers together and bundle it and purchase our electricity as one larger lump sum, getting a lower rate available, but also allowing us to have more flexibility in where our electricity is coming from, so that we would not just be limited to really one operator. And it would create more competition where we could actually have renewable energy companies who are looking to build more infrastructure such as solar to be able to come in here and establish themselves. So it would increase the actual pool of renewable energy being created here in Georgia too.
In some ways, it would reflect the kind of change in environment that we've seen over the last 20 years with cable service and with natural gas.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I mean, the federal government has been somewhat pushing this a little bit, at least encouraging it to some degree. And it's been especially successful in California, which was one of the first states to really get into it. So we have the most communities there who are actually doing this. And there's now entire counties that are operating off 100% renewable energy already by doing it through this system. And it does have a clause in there where customers can opt out. So if they don't want to be part of this, they can. But most customers probably would not want to, because when this is done in most places, it's actually gone towards having rate decreases. People actually save money because we're able to pull it all together. So I think it's a creative solution, and something like this is going to have to be done eventually. And so I'd love to be starting the conversation with our state legislators on it. And if possible, maybe something we could do here, and I'd be happy to work with Andrew, but like maybe your sustainability office to look into this and possibly see what a model could look like for here that we could present that along with just talking about it to the legislators.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, given the dissimilarity from our current kind of very zoned environment with electrical service, I would anticipate this be probably a several-year process of conversation, but would folks like to introduce this to our assembly members?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thanks, Tim. Jerry, talk a little bit about gaming machines since you have so much experience.
I may
with
be
it.
ahead of myself here. Mr. Attorney, I don't think I've armed you for this or allowed you to become armed. As I understand it, we cannot regulate gaming machines in retail establishments.
That's correct. State is preempted.
Yeah, and so I'm seeing some of the convenience stores bring in gaming machines and then go into a 24-hour operation, which has all kinds of negative repercussions in terms of what's going on in those businesses and their hours of operation affecting the quality of life. And so I'm just going to ask the state to let us regulate or they regulate hours of operation for gaming machines in retail establishments. That's the best I could do.
Okay. I'm supportive of that. All right. And then Transit Director McDuffie brought forward just support for HB 511, which we mentioned earlier, which is being nominally called the Rural Transit Bill.
All right, okay.
Which would allow for single county T-SPLOST, coordination of rural transit and human service transportation. You know, many counties have these federally funded vans. A new revenue source, including M&O. So everybody supportive of this?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Patrick, you want to come back to any of your elements?
Yes. Sorry, it's been a rough day for me, but, so for EMS oversight, there was a Senate bill, there was a House bill last year that was passed, it passed the House HB 264, which would have essentially provided more oversight over the ambulance services, but it would have banned ambulance vendors from serving on the Department of Public Health hiring councils, require vendors to register with the State Ethics Commission, and ban pay-to-play, require mandatory service reviews to ensure safety, and just pretty much open the doors for private meetings. It made it all the way to the Senate, and it did not pass. There was a poison pill that was put into the bill, and it didn't pass. And I just wanted to see
I'll support that, Patrick.
that goes through, but and cancel the broadband service because Governor Deal is already working on that.
And, you know, around rural broadband, I know that kind of funding has been a question with the state, so there may need to be some funds attached to that.
It's a good list.
So funds attached to rural broadband, revive HB 264. It's good with those? All right. I know there's a little bit of language to finesse. I'll work with y'all to get that done. Get this out to you about a week from now, just to review before we put this on the work session for next month. Does that sound good?
And so we're meeting with the legislators next month?
Next month.
And do we have that date confirmed with them? I just don't want to have another date moved off.
Gene, do we have that?
Normally vote on these issues at a regular meeting because they'll ask us, have we voted on these as unanimous?
Yeah, in
So
fact.
these need to be on our agenda setting for next Tuesday.
In fact,
right.
you need to understand that our delegation has said that they won't support anything that isn't unanimously supported by us, so.
That's correct. So if y'all gonna rewrite these, I need those by close of business tomorrow to get them on the agenda for next week.
All right. I think we can work on that.
Okay.
All right. And then Gene, you'll contact delegation members for next month.
Yep. It's
Fantastic.
tentative on the calendar, but I waited on tonight, and I'll confirm it tomorrow.
Okay.
What's that tentative date? I just want to go ahead and, what's the tentative date?
It will be your work session.
The September
10th,
work session?
September 10th,
Okay.
is that it?
And I guess, Blaine, you might be able to, or Gene, you might be able to, how stacked is that agenda for that work session?
It's pretty stacked. It's at the bottom of our agenda
So it's
today.
5 items.
Okay. Is that going to, in the past, I remember at least whenever I've been at these, like, that's usually the first thing we take on with
It
them
would be
here?
the first thing out of deference, but
Okay, I just ask it, it's a long list that we have here, so, yeah.
yeah.
Well, you transmit it to them in advance, Gene? Yeah,
Once the commission votes on it.
that's right.
Yeah.
All right, everyone, thank you much. Have a great night.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Gene. Thanks, Judd. Thanks, Blaine. Deborah, John.